A soft glow gathers where the night grows thin. Out beyond the orbits of ice, past the pale blue wake of Neptune, a whisper drifts through space and brushes Saturn's rings. The camera of your mind moves slowly, as though on rails, sliding along a river of light. Cold diamonds of ice glint and fade. In the distance, a silver lattice wavers an edge of ring shadow, a frost of dust. And somewhere inside that haze, something hums. The James Webb Space Telescope turns its patient eye. Mirrors unfold like a pressed flower. The dish balances sun and shade, holding the spacecraft steady as it drinks the dark. Instruments settle into silence so deep you can hear the mathematics inside it. The counting of photons, the rhythm of timing ticks, the soft breath of chilled sensors. If space can ever be called warm, it is in this quiet, where data moves like a slow tide. At first, the signal is only a rumor-thin spider silk, light as a thought. It threads through the spectrograph and leaves a faint comb of lines. Most lines are familiar. Hydrogen sings in one place. Methane answers in another. Dust speaks in a noise that engineers can fold away. But there, in the dim between, rests a small pattern that refuses to belong. It is neither storm nor simple magnetospheric chatter, not the usual radio sigh of ring particles brushing ring particles. It is a shape that should not be there, and yet is. The team explains in calm voices. Light is a message carried by waves. The spectrograph spreads that message into colors and peaks. Each peak is a character, a letter written by atoms and fields. Most nights, the letters spell stories we already know. A comet outgassing, a flare from a distant star, a faint echo of a nebulous dust. Tonight, a few letters rearrange. The story mutters. A forbidden word appears and vanishes, as if shy. If you're listening as you drift towards sleep, that is why these films exist. Subscribe, and leave a note of where you are and what time it is. I read them Karachi near midnight, Chicago at dusk, Kyoto before dawn bright pins on a blue world. They remind me that while Webb listens above, we are listening below, together, like towns on the shore, watching the same quiet tide. Engineers bend close to their screens. They are keepers of the calm. They check the path of the telescope, drift by drift, making sure a slow roll hasn't introduced a false beat. They test the cold. Does a small wobble in temperature add music where none belongs? They read the logs for interruptions, thruster whispers, reaction wheel size, solar wind puffs that could rattle delicate measurements. The list is long, and it is comforting. When wonder arrives, it is stronger for careful doubt. Astronomers, too, lean in. They compare tonight's whisper with records from older instruments, Hubble's quiet years, radio arrays on the ground, even the diary of Voyager passing Saturn long ago. They look for cousins to this fragile hum. Some think of pulsars, those lighthouses of gravity and time. Others check the timing of meteors and small bodies that slip through ring gaps. If a shard of rock spun just so, it might flicker like this. But the cadence does not feel like a shard. The documentary voice lowers and smooths, a hand on the edge of sleep. Imagine the ringed planet not as stone and ice, but as a patient fortress. Rings bend near gravity wells. Dust charges and discharges with the solar wind, each grain a little drum. Out here, starlight can be shaped by the simplest things. Yet this shaping holds its own melody, a rhythm that resists easy names. It is careful. It keeps its distance. It returns. The signal threads the solar wind like a needle. It slides through the plasma that pours from our sun. Charged particles curl around magnetic field lines and hum. The hum matches models until it doesn't. A few beats run counter to expectation, like a heartbeat that forgets and then remembers itself. The spectrograph, precise as a metronome, marks each beat with a narrow line. Lines gather, then scatter, the way birds will flock and then open. Data arrives in parcels. Each packet is logged. Time is stamped. Error bars stretch like little arms around each point, kind and honest. Where doubt is large, the line is light. Where confidence grows, the line darkens. Someone has drawn a curve across the screen, gentle, tidal. The curve almost tells a story. Almost. It rises, falls, and leaves a gap like an inhale. Even the gap feels chosen. Nothing moved fast, and that is a gift. The telescope rides a calm orbit near the cold side of Earth, where light is steady. Observations repeat. The world rotates below, but here the sky is a stable sea. In this sea, the anomaly swims like a slow fish near the surface, showing a fin and then slipping under. Patience is the first method. If it is a messenger, it is polite. It speaks without interrupting the night. A scientist reaches for a notebook. Paper has a way of making ideas behave. Lines become columns. Columns become tables. In the left margin, time in seconds. Next, frequency in hertz. Next, amplitude small and neat. They mark down suspected sources, each with a small square to tick when disproved. Pulsar, unlikely, period unstable. Ring storm, too narrow. Tumble of ice, does not repeat. Instrument artifact, tests do not support. The empty squares shrink, but one remains unlabeled, patient. Sensations pour in even as the voice stays level. You can feel the scale Saturn wide as a thought that fills a life. Rings thin as a hair you could lay across the moon. Tiny moonlets pull at strands of dust. The sun breathes. Space curls around magnetic fields like silk around wire. And inside that weave, a pattern glows, then fades, then glows again. It is as if the night were clearing its throat. Engineers run calibration lamps. They send known light into the instrument and see if the instrument answers correctly. It does. They nudge the pointing off the ring plane by a breath to hear whether the whisper follows. The whisper thins. They return to the original line. The whisper returns, shy but steady. Somewhere near the ringed fortress, the silent visitor prefers its narrow stage. You are not asked to believe. You are invited to listen. The science stands, orbit, geometry, spectra, noise. Awe joins, soft as a blanket. It says that large worlds can hold small secrets for a very long time. It says that past the math, there is a feeling, and that feeling has guided every mirror that ever looked up. Galileo sketched an oval and guessed at what he could not see. Now a mirror in deep shade counts photons that old eyes could only dream about. They are the same act, centuries apart. The question form of the mind wakes and whispers. Is this a messenger or only memory? Some signals are echoes from long ago, bent by gravity, delayed by dust. They travel like letters lost in the mail and found years later, still sealed. Others are born fresh in the mouths of storms. This one does not say which it is. It will not hurry. It gives what it gives, thin silver lines and a calm beat against the dark sea. Imagine yourself floating there, not far from the ring's far, yet closer than you have ever been. You turn in slow motion. Each eye shard flashes like a tiny moon. Your breath fogs your visor and clears again. You tilt your head toward the hum. It threads the cold like a wire under snow. You are not the source. You are not the target. You are only the listener. That is enough. Back on Earth, dawn crosses continents. In some rooms, night guards their screens. In others, coffee steams at a window. On a whiteboard, someone writes 3 words: structured, faint, persistent. They circle persistent. The circle is a promise to stay, to wait, to listen more closely. Another hand adds a small sketch of rings, a little arrow, a smiley face that looks oddly like a crater. Science is careful, but the people inside it are human. Hope is allowed. Webb keeps its vigil. Spectrographs breathe. The data pipeline hums. Across the network, files move like weather. Algorithms test for repetition, for spacing that primes with love, for cadence that feels slightly human. Most tests pass gently into nothing. A few raise eyebrows. Nothing shouts meaning. Everything whispers possibility. In the hush, even doubt behaves like a kind teacher. Ask again. Check again. See if it holds. The planet itself turns in the far sunlight, its storms stacked like braided clouds. Shadows of rings stripe its curves. In those shadows, light mutters and then brightens. The glow is not constant, which gives it character. Many natural things change with time, but some changes keep time as if they are lead. This glow seems to know a step and keeps it softly, not precisely, the way a human will sway even after the music stops. Where a story begins is often a matter of choice. We could begin with star birth and dust, with gravity choosing company over emptiness. We could start with the first glass lens held up to the night. Tonight, we begin with a quiet pattern hiding inside a luminous veil near a ringed world. It is a small beginning. It is enough. The rest is patience. The camera pulls back until the planet is a coin and the rings are a scratch on glass. The whisper falls below hearing, but does not vanish. Numbers keep it safe. They stack like stones in a dry riverbed, marking where water once ran. Later, someone will walk that bed and trace the edges with a finger. They will find the smooth stones that should not match and find that they do. The voice draws down to a slow cadence. You know this feeling. A window open to the cool, a lamp dimming, the page of a book growing heavy in your hand. Somewhere far away, a world the color of ash turns and turns. The signal, if it is real, if it is meant, will wait. If it is nature, it will teach. If it is memory, it will hold. The sky is a cradle of silence, and inside it, a gentle veil lifts. The hum thins to a line, and the line to a point, and in that point, a question glows without heat. The night does not answer. It does not need to. The silence deepened, yet hidden in that silence was something waiting to be understood. Saturn rises like a patient fortress, pale and immense, lines of ice and shadow fanned out like a shield. The image is simple and soft, a lantern floating in a dark lake. From far away, the rings seem solid, a single brush stroke across the sky. Move closer, imagine drifting in silence. Webb's mirror gliding behind you, and the stroke becomes 100,000 threads. Each thread made of ice no larger than a snowflake or a house. Each turning in its lane with careful grace. The telescope listens more than it looks. Sensors rest in deep cold, waiting for small changes in light and rhythm. Engineers guide the field of view along the ring plane, then off it by a hair, comparing one position with another the way a musician tunes a violin by ear. The faint signal that drew a question in the last night is still here, very soft, almost shy, the present. It hovers at the edge of hearing. It seems to care where the instrument points, as if the fortress itself were shaping a whisper. Bedtime science is gentle and clear. Rings are what happens when gravity says, "Come close," and tides say, "Not too close." Inside the Roche limit, moons that try to form are pulled apart. Pieces that drift too far are tugged back in. The result is order made from breaking, bands of orbiting ice and dust, layered by distance from the planet and disciplined by rhythm. Resonances lace the lane's simple ratios in motion. When a small moon like Mimas completes one orbit for every two of a ring particle, the tug repeats at the same place, the way a child pushes a swing. Given time, a gap opens the Cassini division, a clean line left by a steady beat. All the while, sunlight paints everything with a slow hand. At low angle, the rings turn into a screen for the sky, letting structures show that the eye can't otherwise see. Tiny flakes charge and discharge under ultraviolet light, rising a little above the ring plane like smoke that doesn't quite lift. The solar wind arrives from the sun thin, quick, always carrying charged particles and changes in magnetic field. Where wind and rings meet, the dust can speak. The language is radio and light, a faint murmur that instruments can translate into lines and pulses. Tonight, the lines appear and do not fully match the old grammar. The team compares timing against known travelers that cross the ringed realm. Meteor trails scribble through once in a while, small stones glowing and gone. They leave quick, ragged signatures, not the patient pacing now at hand. Passing asteroids, if they cut the line of sight, would dip the light and go. Their rhythm would be irregular, tied to chance. This rhythm is more cautious, like a hand tapping a table in the dark, testing the wood. Webb spectrographs work like prisms with rulers attached. Light is bent into colors. Each color is measured for its strength. Tiny spikes appear where something special happens, an element, a temperature, a field. The spikes here form combs, and the teeth of the comb have spacing that teases meaning. The scientists paint their graphs with data and add transparent error bars like gauze. The bars overlap and part, whispering, "This is real. This might be real. This is likely noise." The whisper that remains reaches across several passes, faint yet persistent, like a note sustained just below the music. Imagine looking up tonight, seeing a faint glow moving across the stars. The voice softens to meet the thought. You tilt your head, even if you are listening in bed. You imagine the glow as a slow river, and in that river, a little wave that repeats, not bright enough to claim the sky, but bright enough to ask a question. The question is not shouted. It hums. Ring dynamics in simple words. Each particle is a tiny moon with its own small orbit. Together, they are a flat flock. Gravity from Saturn holds the flock down. Gravity from moons at the edges shapes the lanes. Where anchor keeler carve gaps, shepherds keep their herds in line. Collisions are gentle most of the time, touches that exchange momentum and smooth out extremes. If one flake strays too high, electrostatic forces and the planet's magnetic field may tug it back, or let it float a little, forming faint spokes that phase in and out like breath on glass. Could these charged spokes sing? They do, a little. Past missions heard Saturn's magnetosphere produce radio songs, bursts and hisses, auroral curtains of sound at wavelengths longer than human ears can sense. Those songs, however, follow patterns we know. They answer to the solar wind's pressure and to the changing angles of the planet's tilt. The current whisper does not fit so neatly. Its cadence drifts in and out as Webb samples along a line, just skimming the safer shadows at the ring's edge. It brightens near a place where particles switch lanes, then fades where the ice becomes thicker and the rhythm of collisions goes dull. On Earth, the analysts fold in other watches. A ground array logs meteor showers, the Leonids, the Geminids, old names for old rivers of dust. Correlations are tested, tides are charted, and the season of the sun's breath is plotted. The result is not certain, but it is steady. The anomaly pays little attention to these calendars. It answers to a geometry more local: ring plane, ring edge, a hush where a shadow falls. It is the difference between a distant storm and a hand passing over a lamp. The calm voice walks the map. Outer rings, sparse, wide snow. Inner rings, dense silver bands, packed like pages. Here, the particles carry light the way a million tiny mirrors might, scattering sunlight into thin shafts that sweep like lighthouses along the planet's cloud tops. The planet returns its own light, warm from within, a dull glow that the rings reflect back in broken brush strokes. Between these strokes lies the path of the signal, a thread woven near the seam of day and night. Engineers tilt Webb slightly off the ring plane to test. The whisper thins but doesn't vanish. They tilt back. It strengthens, as though it prefers the fortress wall to the field beyond. They slide along to a new longitude, letting the telescope's line of sight cross another shepherd's influence. Here the rhythm shifts, not in pitch but in timing, an offbeat that suggests a conductor the team cannot see. The change is small, careful. It does not feel like error. Numbers comfort. They make good bedtime. Orbital resonance is the music of long patience, one object circling 2 times while another circles 1, or 3 to 2, or 5 to 3, the kinds of simple fractions a child could tap on a desk. Over years, these taps move dust and ice into lanes and gaps, write divisions and edges, shape the fortress. If a signal rides this structure, it may borrow the same fractions. The team tests for them, running Fourier transforms like combs through hair, catching tangles, smoothing noise. Some fractions appear, others do not. The melody remains incomplete, a song you half remember from a dream. The narration lingers over feeling without rushing to claim. Wonder is not the opposite of fact. It is the light that lets you read it. A ring is a fallen moon taught to be beautiful. A gap is a letter in a book that gravity writes. A whisper on the edge of a gap may be a word, or the rustle of a page turning. The difference takes time to hear. Charged dust complicates the ear. A grain less than a millimeter wide can float above the ring plane for hours, catching field lines like a kite string. When thousands rise together, they make dim spokes that crawl across the rings faster than the ice below. Sunlight and shadow pass like slow tides and change the charge. The spokes fade and return, artifacts of electricity in a quiet sea. Instruments translate their motion into soft signatures. Those signatures can mimic code stutters, pauses, repeats. The team speaks gently to itself. Do not name it yet. Let it be a pattern before it is a message. The planet's own magnetosphere turns, shaped by rotation and wind. Currents loop from pole to equator, hang like invisible cords, and snap back. In this web, a moonlit tug may tug again and again at the same place in space, beating time with a delicate hand. If a conductor exists, it may be nothing more than this: geometry and charge, gravity and light, nature writing measures on a page of ice. And yet, the whisper feels more deliberate than the models predict. It leaves the door ajar. Imagine standing in a dark field on Earth, winter air still around you, breath white in a porch light. Imagine looking up tonight, seeing a faint glow moving across the stars. The words return like a calm tide. The glow is a satellite or a plane or a planet most nights. But some part of you loves the idea that a ringed world could hum and that you could somehow hear it through a telescope, through a graph, through a voice in your headphones that slows the world and lets wonder settle. The sequence of tests continues. Timing is measured against the known touch of passing asteroid fragments that sometimes flicker near the line of sight. No match. The signal's intervals are too patient, too clean for debris. It does not wobble like a tumbling shard. It does not blur like ice in a thermal flare. It keeps returning to the same narrow lanes, as though tracking a boundary drawn not by chance, but by rule. You can almost feel the ring particles brushing one another, exchanging tiny pushes, millions of hands smoothing a crowded hallway. Their rubbing is soundless, but its rhythm is there to see. Behind that rhythm, a second rhythm waits, a softer hand, a lighter touch, like a singer catching breath between verses. That second rhythm is the anomaly, the visitor. It will not step forward into the light, but it will not leave. In the quiet of the control room, a new note appears on a whiteboard. Fortress geometry favored. A second note follows. Check nearby bodies. The fortress is built from gravity, charge, sunlight, and time. It is also surrounded by small companions, shepherds and wanderers whose shadows fall across the rings like the sweep of a slow pendulum. If the rings are not the origin, they may be the stage. Something just off-stage could be casting the shape. The camera of the mind drifts outward again. The planet becomes a pearl. The rings, a halo. The stars, the old choir. The whisper rests at the edge of hearing, neither claiming nor fleeing. A soft glow pressed to the wall of a fortress older than any map. The science remains steady: ring dynamics, resonances, the wind of the sun, the language of charged dust. The story remains kind: no alarms, only patience. The night folds over the ring plane like a gentle veil, and in that veil, a small pulse continues to breathe. If the rings are not the source, they are at least the mirror. And beyond the mirror, in the drifting quiet, one could almost sense that another secret was about to reveal itself. Night widens until the sky feels like an atlas. Somewhere along the dark, a thin silver thread runs soft as breath, patient as tide. Astronomers become mapmakers. They sit before quiet screens and draw with light. Their tools are not ink and paper, but timestamps, pulse widths, and the steady lines of a spectrograph. Over and over, they trace the whisper that brushed Saturn's rings, trying to see where it came from and where it wants to go. The work is simple to say and careful to do. First, they mark when the signal appears. They mark when it fades. They measure how long each burst lasts and how long the space is between bursts. Those spaces matter. A heartbeat is not only sound. It is the time between sounds that tells the story of health. Space is the same with light. The intervals hint at a shape behind the glow, something that spins or orbits or echoes off a surface we cannot see. Spectrograph lines brighten and dim like the bars on a music player. Most belong to known singers. Hydrogen hums here. Methane answers there. Dust lays down a soft hiss everywhere. The anomaly places thin bright stitches between these voices, a forbidden pattern that shows, relaxes, then shows again. The mapmakers do not rush to name it. They draw the stitches onto a chart of the sky, adding small arrows for direction, short lines for strength, and pale circles for doubt. They reach backward into history. Hubble has watched the rings. So have radio dishes spread across Earth and spacecraft that once flew close enough to taste the charged dust. The team opens old files the way a librarian opens a book of weathered pages. Did any past watcher feel this same tug? They check dates of comet perihelion times when icy travelers swing near the sun and pour gas into space. Comets can add a murmur to the sky. They check meteor streams that cross our view. The Leonids, the Quadrantids, the long, slow Draconids. Those streams make bursts that start and stop like a storm of pebbles on a roof. The cadence on tonight's chart is calmer, more consistent, too patient to be pebbles. Mapping needs a frame. The frame is motion. Webb floats steady at a quiet point in orbit, but nothing else is truly still. Saturn moves along its path. The rings revolve. Shepherd moons tug and release. The sun breathes wind. Even the background, the dust between stars and the thin glow of distant nebulae, adds light that rises and falls as our line of sight slips past it. To be fair to the whisper, the team subtracts these motions, one by one, like layers of fog gently lifted by a hand. They begin with timing offsets. Light from the far sky reaches the telescope with tiny delays. Some delays are caused by the long road. Some come from the instrument itself. Clocks are compared. Signals from guide stars keep the pointing true. Small corrections fold into the data stream like stitches hidden inside the hem of a coat. Each correction is logged. Each log becomes part of the map. Pulse width comes next, the thickness of the signal's brushstroke. A narrow pulse suggests a small, sharp source or a clean echo. A wide pulse could be smeared by motion, by scattering dust, or by two close sources beating together. The anomaly strokes are slim, but not razor-thin. They vary just enough to keep the heart curious. The team plots width against time, width against angle, width against the position of nearby moon shadows. Some trends appear, modest and polite. Others flatten like a horizon in fog. Background nebula emissions are the deep ocean of starlight. They roll in with a slow tide, hardly changing in a single night. The mapmakers modeled the tide with functions as smooth as quiet water, low-order polynomials and gentle splines, and subtracted. What remains are islands, short, clean changes that stand above the swell. The anomaly sits on one of those islands, under a gentle veil, a bright dot that refuses to be explained away. Cartography in the old days used compasses and sextants. Today, it uses baselines and cross-checks. A second instrument verifies the first. A ground array listening at a different wavelength looks for the same beat. An older radio archive is combed for a cousin of the rhythm. If a cousin is found, they compare distance and time. A pulsar, for example, would show timing so stable you could set a clock by it. The whisper is not that strict. It drifts, though not wildly. It feels more like someone walking with purpose, but pausing at doorways to listen. They test the pulsar idea anyway, because the sky loves to make us humble. Pulsars are fast lighthouses, neutron stars that spin and sweep. Their pulses are narrow, regular, and last for ages. The team lines the anomalies' intervals next to those of known pulsars. Some moments look similar, like two songs that share a beat. Then the similarity breaks. The whisper wanders off the grid and comes back by another path, the way a memory arrives and leaves in fragments. If not a pulsar, could the signal be a coded reply? That thought is dangerous and beautiful. It lives at the edge of science and dream. The mapmakers honor it by testing, not by claiming. They check for small primes and spacing, 2, 3, 5, 7 counts that nature uses, but that intention sometimes favors. They test simple binary patterns, on-off sequences that could carry a simple word, a number, or a marker like start. A fragile scaffold appears in one set of intervals and softens in the next. Hope rises like a kite and is brought back down before the string snaps. The narration stays slow, kind, and clear. Data are a river. Numbers are a lullaby. Put enough nights together and a map takes shape, even if the roads do not yet have names. The team overlays each pass on a polar plot centered on Saturn. The ring edges are drawn like tree rings. Shepherd moons are marked as small beads traveling on threads. The anomaly's appearances cluster along a narrow arc just outside a shadowed lane. It is not a perfect cluster, but it is more than a guess. The atlas gains a page. With each page, the tools learn humility. Algorithms that once flagged noise now ask for second chances. Bias is a quiet danger seeing a pattern we wish to see. To protect against it, the mapmakers shuffle the data and run blind tests where the algorithm does not know which slice is real and which is randomly generated. If it finds the same structure in shuffled sets, the pattern is a trick. It does not. It catches more structure in the true sets, not every time, but often enough to keep the room hushed. A soft montage unfolds, hands around mugs of tea, a dim clock ticking, a mouse pointer hovering over a spike, someone adjusting their chair and exhaling, a page of equations with eraser dust like snow. No one speaks loudly. Every so often someone smiles without words, the way a person smiles at a sleeping child. They try parallax checks, watching the same region at slightly different angles to see if the source shifts the way a close firefly would. The shift is tiny, less than models would predict for a near object, more than expected for a far background galaxy. The result sits on the fence. The fence itself becomes a point on the map. Not too near, not too far, something threaded through the ringed space rather than behind it. They try dispersion. Signals that pass through plasma slow down different colors by different amounts. By measuring how much frequencies spread, you can guess how much plasma they crossed. The spread is modest. It suggests a path through local fields and dust, not a journey from a distant nebula. Yet one edge of the spread is ragged, as if something in the path was changing, flexing like a rope in wind. Through it all, the tone stays calm. The film does not rush. The camera of the mind glides past ice cliffs a meter wide and then opens to Saturn's whole halo, thin as breath, strong as law. Every law here is generous with time. Resonance builds gaps over centuries. Erosion polishes ice for eons. Whatever the whisper is, it respects the pace of the place it lives in. It appears, rests, appears again. Awe and caution sit side by side, back straight, hands folded. Maps are promises, not conclusions. On an old sea chart, unvisited coasts were drawn as dotted lines. The team does the same with uncertainty. They shade regions where the anomaly prefers to speak. They leave blank those where it goes quiet. They add little compass roses labeled with error bars. Each row says, "Here we are confident. Here we wonder." The atlas grows beautiful in a quiet, technical way, like frost on glass. And still the question glows. If this is not ordinary starlight, what are we hearing? A coded reply would repeat, would anchor itself to simple counts that any mind could share. The whisper only sometimes plays by that rule. A pulsar would lock its tempo like a metronome. The whisper breathes. An echo would slowly fade unless fed. The whisper renews. A natural instrument could do this magnetized space, guided by moons, plucking field lines as if they were strings. A messenger could do it too, borrowing nature's guitar, so the song sounds like wind. Night after night, the cartographers keep drawing. The atlas becomes a story without chapters, a scroll that unrolls across a desk and over the floor. The signal's thin thread weaves through it, sometimes bright, sometimes pale, always fragile. The more they trace, the more the thread respects a few simple lanes, as if unwilling to cross certain lines. There is a grace in the restraint. There is also weight. Far away, beyond the ring light, the stars hold their old positions like elders in a circle. Their light has traveled for years and years to sit on the telescope's mirror. Some of that light comes from clouds where new suns will form. Some comes from ruins of stars that died. All of it is history. As the team studies tonight's pattern, they feel the hush of those older stories. People have always looked up and tried to draw sense from points and lines. They made constellations, then ephemerides, then spectrograms. Each age drew what it knew how to draw. Now, in the cradle of silence around a ringed world, a new line asks to be drawn. It is not loud. It is not cruel. It is simply there, a patient visitor in a luminous haze, like chalk on a dark board that no one remembers writing. The atlas will not be finished tonight or tomorrow or soon, but the mapmakers do not mind. They breathe with the pace of the data, steady and slow, and let the river of numbers keep them. On the screen, lines thicken, fade, and return, and in their gentle motion, the past seems to lean close, as if an old page were turning somewhere just out of sight. The glow softens, the graphs dim, and the room quiets to a kind of listening that feels like memory. The silence deepened, yet hidden in that silence was something waiting to be understood. The night opens like an old book, its pages thin as frost. Across those pages, people have always written small notes to the sky dots, lines, names that feel like prayers. Tonight, the documentary voice turns back through time, looking for how we learned to listen. Before there were cameras in orbit, there were eyes on rooftops. Before there were spectrographs, there were careful marks on clay and paper. Each mark, a promise to remember where a star had been and where it might go next. In a room lit like evening, historians lift a tablet from an archive drawer. The clay holds neat rows of signs made thousands of years ago by hands that once felt the same chill we feel now. Babylonian star lists record rising times, bright wanderers, and omens read at dawn. The lists are not superstition to us anymore. They are data, patterns kept across seasons by minds that loved order. When Saturn's slow, patient rose where it ought to, they pressed a mark. When it lagged or burned brighter than usual, they pressed another. Listening began with counting. Turn the book forward. An artisan grinds glass. Another grinds again, stir by stir, until two lenses can kiss the air without cracking it. Galileo lifts a tube to the night and finds more than he expected. Moons around Jupiter, scars on the sun, a strange oval around Saturn that will not resolve into a single shape. He draws what he can see and labels it carefully, though his hand shakes a little in the cold. Some nights the oval seems like ears. Some nights it smears into fog. He does not give up. The drawings are small, but they matter. They say, I saw this. They say, I returned and saw it again. On a wooden table, a prism rolls into a beam of light. A stripe of color spreads across a wall red to violet, a short rainbow domesticated indoors. Later, a slit is added, then a scale, then a telescope at the slit to watch the stripes twist and sharpen. These are early spectroscopes, and they are keys. What looked like white light becomes a secret choir once it is split. Dark lines, bright lines, precise as fingerprints, fill the band. Helium will be found in the sun before it is found on Earth. Hydrogen will sing in a set of lines, so consistent they will anchor measurements for centuries. What the prism does to light, the mind does to wonder. It separates and names. The voice moves slowly, unhurried by dates. Radio astronomy arrives like a new sense. An engineer listening for lightning finds the sky whispering at longer wavelengths. A faint hiss that is not weather. Dishes are built big, patient ears pointed upward. After war comes peace, and in the peace, curiosity ripens. The Milky Way glows in radio. Quiet sources become bright. Pulsars surprise the world. Fast, regular, as if the universe had placed metronomes among the stars. For a while, people wonder if those pulses might be greetings. They name one source LGM-1. Little green men, half in jest, half in awe. The jest fades. The awe stays. Pages turn again. Spacecraft grow brave and leave home. Voyager, thin as a paper crane compared to the giant it approaches, threads Saturn's field and watches the rings turn to music. Instruments translate charged particles into radio song hiss, chirp, roar, curtain, drum. The songs are beautiful and natural. They obey wind and tilt and the rhythm of the planet's day. They are the voice of a magnetosphere learning to dance with a star. The recordings are filed, shared, turned into maps and melodies that drift through lecture halls and late-night radio shows. In them, we hear nothing intentional, nothing crafted, just nature being wide and alive. The documentary voice remains gentle. History is not a race. It is a river. We float past landmarks of careful listening, the first stable clocks, the plates that captured starlight on glass. The night a long spectrum was stretched across a darkroom wall. The day a technician heard a skyborn hiss on headphones and frowned because it did not match the chart. Listening took patience and instruments, but also a posture of mind. Humility that kept us from naming things too quickly. Curiosity that kept us from looking away. Now Webb waits far from weather, in a soft balance of light and shade. Its mirrors align to a fraction of a hair. Its spectrographs take that long tradition in hand and carry it further into the dark. The faint cadence we have been following does not fit any simple path from the past. It is not the short beat of a pulsar. It is not the broad noise of a ring storm. It is too organized to be instrument cough, too shy to be a bold roar of space weather. It feels like a note held just under the music we already know. We pause with earlier listeners who mistook wonders for messages and messages for noise. Quasars once puzzled the world, bright, distant, flickering too fast for their size, until we learned to weigh black holes with beams of light. Fast radio bursts arrived faster still, a sprinkle of pops from random corners of the sky. For years they looked like accidents. Then some repeated, and repetition made them kin to clocks. Not alien, but also not trivial. A phenomenon, not a prank. The past is a chorus that keeps saying the same thing. Look longer. A quiet montage lays itself over the narration. Pages of a Galileo notebook turning in gloved hands. A metal prism case opened like a jewelry box. A gray photo plate with starry freckles, one freckle circled by pen. A Voyager diagram of Saturn's field lines printed in soft blue. A recording thin, eerie of radio waves from the rings, played at a pitch ears can hear. At the end of the montage, our modern graphs return with their neat axes and brushed fonts. The through line is simple, desire and care repeated. The film speaks softly about omen and prophecy, but not to endorse them. In older nights, people wrote meaning onto the sky because they needed meaning to hold their days together. A bright comet could be a bad harvest. A red moon could be a king's fall. We do not read the firmament that way now. Yet there is something we keep. The sense that the sky is a book you can learn to read if you do the work. Where prophets once stood, now stand patient teams with calibrations and code. The awe is the same. The method is kinder. In a lab lamp circle, someone traces a timeline with a finger. Babylonian lists, Galileo's drawings, early spectroscopes, radio ears, Voyager's flybys, Webb's deep cold. The finger stops at tonight and taps. The signal sits on the timeline like a bead on a string, a quiet bead, unmarked, waiting for a label. The label will not be a prophecy. It will be an equation and a name, or it will be a shrug shaped like a curve that we do not yet understand. Either way, the bead tells us where we are in the long act of listening. The narration holds to a sixth-grade clarity. Light can be split. Patterns can be checked. Natural things make regular sounds. When a sound does not match, we do not panic. We compare. More than once, history warns, we loved a mystery that turned out to be our own breath fogging the lens. More than once, we missed meaning because we thought we knew the tune. The path forward is a braid. Wonder to pull us on. Caution to keep our steps. Back at the telescope, the cadence continues thin, deliberate, unwilling to leave. The team tests its shape against the archive of known forms. Auroral curtains that scroll and crackle. Magnetospheric strings that pluck and hum. Dusty spokes that rise and fade like handwriting on glass. The Whisper shares traits with all of these, but belongs cleanly to none. Its intervals suggest arithmetic, then loosen. Its power shies from brightness, but refuses to fall to zero. The record becomes a page with a margin note written in a hand we almost recognize. In that almost, history breathes. We remember the time ears around Saturn were drawn as horns. We remember LGM-1 becoming PSRB1919 plus 21 with a single equation. We remember the first chemical found in space by its spectral fingerprint before anyone held it in a jar. Each memory is a caution and an encouragement. Caution, the sky can fool us. Encouragement, the sky, when listened to patiently, teaches. The film steps aside to let silence speak. Across centuries, listeners share a quality that does not age. a willing quiet. A Babylonian scribe pressing marks by lamplight. A scholar in Florence leaning over a sketch. A physicist watching a thin line move across graph paper. A modern engineer measuring a flat plateau in the noise. They are family. Each believes the world can be read. Each believes a small sign in the dark might be worth a life's attention. The voice honors them without grandeur. Bedtime stories do not need trumpets. Then the light comes back to the present. Our whisper is neither storm nor ordinary magnetospheric song. It is an anomaly tucked inside a luminous haze. It sits where ring shadow softens light and where field lines lean like reeds in wind. We do not yet have a box to place it in, so we leave the box open and keep watching. This is not a failure. It is the method behaving as it should. History teaching patience, patience teaching method. A hand closes the archive drawer. Another opens a console window. The two motions rhyme. Past and present stand shoulder to shoulder. Data copy across a fiber. Somewhere a clock ticks in atomic regularity. Somewhere else a Braille tablet returns to its shelf. Both are acts of care, both part of the same listening. If the past taught us to listen, the present will teach us how to decode. But decoding does not always mean speech. Sometimes it means recognizing a shape that nature has been drawing in slow motion for longer than we have had names. Sometimes it means letting go of the wish for a messenger and learning to love the instrument. The ringed fortress does not promise answers. It offers a stage where gravity, plasma, and dust play a music we are just beginning to hear. The camera of your mind drifts outward once more. Babylonian brick turns to Roman glass, to brass and steel, to gold-plated mirrors shivering in permanent night. All the while, Saturn turns with a patience that makes human time feel quick and bright, like a moth in a lamp circle. A soft glow skims the rings and fades. Far below, a reader closes a book and sets it near a window where the stars are faint. The signal does not insist. It breathes, and we breathe with it. On the screen, lines gather, then slacken, like tide on a stone stair. Someone writes a date in the corner. Another adds a small arrow. The room is still. The old pages of the sky lie open, and a new line waits for ink. The night is not empty. It is full of careful memory. The glow dims, the instruments rest, and the silence settles around the question we have carried across ages. It does not answer. It does not refuse. It simply stays, quiet and sure, like dust on old pages catching light, and in that quiet, one can feel that the story is not finished, only paused, the hush deep and kind. With something hidden still waiting to be understood, night holds its breath while the checklist opens. Wonder is welcome, but science goes first. The documentary voice stays calm, like a guide with a lantern. The team writes a neat title on the whiteboard, Natural Imposters. Beneath it, a column of suspects: aurora, pulsar, asteroid shard, ring storm, instrument echo, distant nebula glow, galaxy cluster halo, supernova remnant. Each name is a door. Each door will open and, if we are careful, close again. They start with the nearest guess aurora. Saturn's poles were lights the way the Earth does, curtains made from charged particles sliding down magnetic field lines and colliding with thin gas. Auroras sing at radio wavelengths. They flare and fade with the solar wind's pressure and the tilt of the planet's day. Webb can't hear radio waves directly, but it can watch the consequences lines in the spectrum that tremble because fields and particles are restless. The team compares the whisper's timing to solar wind logs. When the wind surges, the aurora should answer. Sometimes it does. Often it doesn't. The cadence of our anomaly keeps its own slow breath, not quite lining up with the wind's quick steps. On the board, a gentle mark: aurora, unlikely driver. Next, pulsar, A lighthouse made of crushed star, spinning and sweeping, can mimic intention. Pulsars repeat with clock-like pride. Their timing stability is so good that a single second can be traced across years. The analysts fold the signal against many trial periods, hunting for a lock. They search harmonics and subharmonics, the simple ratios nature loves. For a moment, the comb of lines seems to click. Then it slides. The intervals drift just enough to miss the grid. Not random, not rigid. A pulsar would not wobble this way unless something heavy tugged at it. Nothing in the field suggests such a tug. A quiet note. Pulsar, disfavored. What if the culprit is simple? A shard of rock or ice turning in sunlight, throwing off a little flash as it spins. Tumbling objects make patterns. Bright, dim, as they present a shiny face and then a dull one. The team models a rotating facet, a mirror as small as a room, drifting near the ring plane. The model repeats too cleanly. Real shards wobble, presses, and wander. Our whisper repeats with care, but not with the clunky courage of a spinning stone. Another note, specular reflection, inconsistent. Ring storms get their turn. When particles gather and fall together like a quiet avalanche, they can raise trails, stir charges, and make faint radio hiss. But storm hiss is broad and busy. Our lines are narrow and polite. The spectrographs show combs with steady teeth, not the brushy smear of storm noise. Ring storm, background contributor only. Instrument echo is always a suspect, because pride can fool a mind faster than noise can. Engineers feed the spectrograph known light from calibration lamps. Dither the pointing, change the detector readout speed, and watch for a phantom that mirrors the anomaly. No echo appears where the signal sits. When the telescope looks off the ring plane, the whisper thins. When it returns to the favored geometry, the whisper returns. The instrument is sturdy. The effect belongs to the sky. Instrumental artifact, not supported. Now the far suspects. The universe is full of gentle imposters, things that look designed because many small pieces act together. Supernova remnants spread like rings of smoke, full of hot gas and magnetic knots. They glow in radio and X-ray, and sometimes they ripple as shock fronts pass through uneven space. Galaxy clusters hold radio halos, a slow hiss from electrons whipping around fields stretched between giant galaxies. The cosmic microwave background itself is a soft bath of ancient light, humming at a pitch the universe set long ago. Could the whisper be a distant choir heard through Saturn's stage? They check catalogs. A supernova remnant would paint the field with broad curves, not narrow teeth that prefer a ring edge. A cluster halo would be patient and large, not flirting with a specific geometry near a planet's shadow. Background starlight hisses, yes, but it hisses everywhere. Our visitor acts local, taking cues from the ring plane and the lean of light across icy lanes. Distant background, unlikely. The board gets tidier. The list shrinks. The voice stays soft, never hurried, careful not to force the path. Magnetospheres come back into view. Picture space around Saturn as strings you cannot see, field lines stretching from pole to pole, from dusk to dawn. Charged particles ride those strings and can pluck them like a harp. If a moonlet passes through at the right time, it can modulate the tune, adding a beat that a patient ear might mistake for speech. The team builds a model. Field lines as elastic cords, plasma as a bow, moonlit orbits as metronomes. The model sings something close to our whisper. Close, but not enough to call it solved. A few intervals still refuse to fit, like shy notes that belong to a different song. Forbidden pattern segments keep turning up spacings that suggest arithmetic, then scatter. The analysts test for primes again, not to prove a sender, but to guard against bias. They fold the data, remove obvious cycle times, and let a simple algorithm look for repeated counts. A scaffold appears weak, gossamer. They repeat the test on shuffled data. The scaffold shrinks. On real data, it returns, almost as if meaning were breathing under a blanket of noise. Not proof, not nothing. The board receives a careful phrase. Structure present. Origin undetermined. They widen the comparison pool. Supernova remnants? No. Galaxy cluster halos? No. Quasar variability? Too fast or too bright for this quiet lane. Background starlight hiss? Too broad. FRB's fast radio bursts once felt like knocks on a door. Now we know many are nature's clever storms. The FRBs arrive sharp and strong, often far from planets. Our whisper is shy, patient, and tied to a geometry near rings. It is something else, or a blend we have not learned to taste. Bedtime science keeps its voice low and steady. Charged particles, when they drift, create currents. Currents make fields. Fields change as the planet turns. Where sunlight skims, micron grains lift and settle in slow tides. These tides can paint shadows with electricity and let weak mirror flashes masquerade as code. Nature can mimic intention without meaning to. Ice on a window can make fern leaves that look hand-drawn. A river can carve letters without learning to write. The film suggests this softly. If nature can impersonate design, the test is patience. Intention repeats in ways that can be shared, taught, anticipated. Nature repeats because laws do, but leaves small, lawful sloppiness that minds can measure. And yet the whisper feels polite. It waits at edges. It answers to a shift in pointing. It prefers the penumbra like a shy animal that stays near hedges. Engineers move the line of sight a fraction again. The amplitude swells, then rests. Analysts trim more possibilities like gardeners trimming a hedge, keeping only branches that bear fruit. What remains is a trimmed shape that looks, from some angles, like a message hidden inside a natural instrument. They compare spectral lines around the feature to libraries built from decades of light. Hydrogen's Balmer series stands where expected. Methane and water signatures in Saturn's reflected glow sit in their lanes. Between them, a narrow ridge rises and falls with the whisper. It is not a chemical line. It is a timing line, a rhythm etched into light levels rather than color. The team overlays this ridge on recordings from supernova shock fronts where thin filaments flicker. The match is weak. They overlay cluster halos. Weaker still. They overlay ring spokes better, but not perfect. The ridge belongs to this place, to this stage, to this quiet drama of dust, field, and orbit. Someone writes 2 words under the shrinking list. Deliberate irregularity. It is not a claim. It is a feeling tied to numbers intervals that keep shape but avoid the exactness that would scream machine. If you were trying to hide in nature's music, you might choose such a step, regular enough to be found, irregular enough to look like wind, or perhaps wind itself in a field we do not yet model, decides to dance this way. The film drifts through gentle images. A moonlit glides like a slow pearl along a gap. Field lines curve like harp strings no hand can touch. A grain of ice rises on a static charge and then settles, writing and erasing a faint spoke. The camera of your mind slides along with Webb's gaze, which holds still the way a listener holds still when a story grows quiet. Natural imposters fall away, but not with a slam. They fade like stars at dawn, one by one, leaving a pale question in the sky. What counts as evidence of intention? A prime count? A grid that stays straight across seasons? A modulation that matches no wind yet maps clean to a simple alphabet? The voice does not push. It lets the questions sit like stones warming in morning light. There is courage in trimming. Each no is a kind of love for the truth, even when the truth might be colder than hope. The whiteboard is nearly clean now. Aurora, pulsar, shard, storm, artifact, remnant, halo, all set aside as primary engines. In the corner, someone sketches a small rectangle labeled natural instrument, and, inside it, two smaller boxes, unmodeled physics and written by messenger. No one underlines either one. They both remain possible, and possibility is the most honest place to rest. The room grows quiet. Monitors hum. The ringed fortress keeps its patient spin. The spectrograph sighs a thin river of numbers onto storage where they cool like glass. The team breathes in rhythm with the graph on the screen, small peaks like mountains, small valleys like lakes. Awe and caution sit shoulder to shoulder, neither leaning away. Outside, the night folds over cities and deserts alike. Somewhere a child points at a bright star and misnames it happily. Somewhere a teacher draws a ring on a blackboard and says, resonance, in a voice that makes the word kind. Somewhere an old recording of Saturn's radio song plays on a low speaker, thin and eerie, and the listener feels a door inside the chest open a little. Back at the console, one more suspect on the list is crossed out. Not with joy, not with sorrow, simply with care. Nature can be a flawless actor. It can pretend to be many things at once, because it is many things at once. If a messenger lives inside its music, we will find the measure that repeats with intention. If no messenger lives there, we will learn a new instrument, and that is also a gift. The lantern of the voice dims to a hush. The ring edge shines like a thread pulled taut. The whisper is still there, thin, deliberate, almost shy. It is less a shout than a breath warmed by meaning we cannot name. The list of impostors lies quiet, trimmed to branches that bear no more fruit. What remains is a careful space where human hands and hearts lean a little closer to the console, listening as if the night itself were leaning back. The glow softens. The numbers slow. And in the drifting quiet, one could almost sense that another secret was about to reveal itself. Night lays a gentle veil over the control room. Screens glow like small moons in orbit around tired faces. The air has that soft hum you can feel more than hair fans, drives, and the thin rush of conditioned air. Here, people keep watch while the telescope listens from far away, balanced in cold shadow. Their hands rest near keyboards. Their eyes drift from graphs to logs to the slow pulse of a clock. The signal, the shy whisper near Saturn's rings, breathes at the edge of the data stream. It is faint. It is patient. It refuses to be ignored. The documentary voice is calm. It keeps its lantern low and steady. This is the part of the story where attention is the main tool. No burst of discovery, no fireworks. Only checks, and then checks of checks. On one monitor, the spectrograph traces a comb of light, a series of thin lines that rise and fall like shallow dunes. On another, a timing panel counts intervals in seconds and fractions of seconds, small boxes filling as each observation completes. A whiteboard on the far wall holds 3 words written in simple letters: repeat, verify, breathe. Engineers begin with calibration. They ask the instrument to measure a known lamp, the way a pianist plays a scale before a song. The lamp's lines are exact. If the instrument hears them wrong, the instrument is at fault, not the sky. Tonight, the lines match within tight limits, tiny errors plotted as dots that hug a straight line. A small cheer would feel too loud here, so no one gives it voice. Someone just nods and writes the numbers down. The telescope is healthy. The problem, if there is a problem, lives outside. They test the clock next. Time can slip if you let it. A mismatched second adds a false beat, and a false beat can look like intention. The system clock agrees with the atomic clock, down to a whisper of uncertainty. Corrections are applied. Logs are signed. The beat remains. If a mirage is present, It is not the clock's doing. Pointing is checked. Where did Webb look? Exactly. Guide stars fix the gaze. Reaction wheels keep it steady. Engineers reconstruct the pointing path, turn by turn, like tracing footprints along a quiet shore. A small drift appears where a micro-adjust happened to keep the target centered. The drift is accounted for in software. The whisper does not change. This is good. This is also humbling. The sky is still saying the same thing. Cross-instrument validation begins. Instruments that do not measure color the same way still respond to brightness the same way. If two sensors agree on timing and shape, trust grows. A narrowband channel whispers. A broader channel nods. Different gain settings are tried. The pattern shrinks and grows with the expected math, not with surprise. Human shoulders loosen. Something real is out there, though real does not yet mean message. It only means the same light behaves the same way from more than one angle. Between tests, a quiet life unfolds. Someone warms their hands at a paper cup. Someone else rubs eyes and laughs without sound when the automatic blinds think it's sunrise and lift. Then lower again, embarrassed. A coat over the back of a chair looks like a person. The person returns and the coat becomes a coat again. Night work makes friends of illusions, but the graphs keep them honest. Peaks rise. Peaks fall. The room breathes with them. Validation moves outward. Ground telescopes are asked to watch the same geometry if weather allows. Not all can. Clouds do not care about ring planes. Those that do send back curves with bigger error bars, but similar shapes. A radio array, listening at a frequency that dances with charged dust, reports a slight flutter when Webb sees a rise. It is not perfect alignment, but it is a family resemblance. Caution and hope share a seat. The team marks the board. Coincident hints. Now they try to make the signal go away. This is an odd kind of courage, trying to erase what you want to keep. They nudge the pointing slightly off the ring plane. The whisper thins. They return. It strengthens. They shift along the ring edge. The cadence changes, not in pitch but in spacing, as though something in the penumbra is tapping a different rail. Each adjustment is small, chosen to avoid harm to the instrument. The responses are small too, but steady. If a ghost follows you when you turn, it is less likely to be a smudge on your glasses. It is something in the room. Randomization tests approach with quiet ceremony. Analysts scramble the order of the timestamps, then feed the shuffled series to the same algorithms that have found structure. The structure dims in the scramble. They rotate the phases, shift the intervals, remove the slow trend. In each test, the whisper loses some of its poise. When the true order returns, the poise returns. The result is not a trumpet. It is a deep breath let out slowly, relief colored by respect. The cadence resists randomization. It prefers its own steady step. Human stories edge into the science, not as decoration, but as context. Night shift can feel like a small boat in a very black sea. A technician keeps a picture of a sleeping child at the base of their monitor, a tiny moon on a strip of tape. Another leaves a note for the morning crew. Tea in the drawer, third from the left, with a small drawing of rings that looks like a smile. In a hush like this, care keeps people upright. So does humor. So does the feeling of being part of a long relay where hands pass the same careful baton. A senior engineer, hair silver and face kind, explains the next step to a new pair of eyes. We triangulate with ourselves, she says softly. We test a dozen ways to be wrong before we accept one reason to be right. She points to the sequence of runs. Baseline, offset, lamp, dark, repeat. The sky does not owe us clarity. We earn it. Dark frames are taken measurements with the shutter closed to catch the instrument's own breath. The breath is present, as always, thermal and electronic noise that quilts the data with a faint, even grain. The anomaly sits above that grain by a margin that statistics can hold. Not by much. Enough. A thin mountain above a flat plain. The room listens to the soft click of keys as someone marks the exact times of the whisper's stronger peaks. Those times, spaced across hours, seem to favor the edges of ring shadow where a small moon's path might brush the field. If a shepherd moon is lightly modulating the seam-tugging field lines, stirring charged dust, then the modulation might rise where shadow and geometry meet. It is a plausible story. It is not yet a conclusion. The team writes it down as a testable idea, not a belief. Edge modulation favored. A lull settles. Data copy across the network like snow that never melts. The last test in the queue completes with a soft chime. Someone yawns, then flips to a fresh log page and writes the date, the universal time, and a line that reads, "No anomalies in instrument behavior." The double meaning is not lost. The anomaly is in the sky, not in the machine. Machines can be fixed by hands. The sky cannot. The sky must be understood. Imagine this moment as you drift. The console lights are low. The ringed planet is far and calm. You do not need to move or speak. You only need to let the graph breathe. Peaks like small mountains and valleys like lakes, each carried from a place your feet will never touch. Wonder sits on one side of you. Doubt sits on the other. They are both good company when kept gentle. The beat seems to lean toward courtesy. It stays clear of shouting. It comes back when asked without being forced. If it is an omen, it is patient. If it is a secret, it is polite. The team cannot help smiling at the phrasing. The board gets a small heart next to the word polite. It is not a scientific symbol, but it holds truth. The signal behaves as if it means no harm. They try one more maneuver that is safe and small. A slight tilt that changes the path through the ring's diffuse edge, where dust rises like breath. The response arrives like a nod, measurable but modest. Someone hums a few notes under their breath and stops, as if not to risk confusing the data with music in the mind. The results are logged and graphed. The pattern remains. The voice gathers the room's quiet into words you can trust. Science is not a set of answers. It is the art of asking the same question until the answer stops changing. Tonight's question, does the cadence belong to the instrument, has been asked in many forms. The answers point away from the machine and toward the sky. Cross-instrument checks agree. Ground hints agree. Randomization disagrees. Off-axis tests respond. Dark frames remain dark. The list of doubts grows shorter. The list of careful hopes grows longer. No one declares victory. A victory would be a name, a model that fits, a mechanism that sings the melody we hear. That day will not come by accident, and it will not come by wish. It will come by slow practice. More nights, more angles, more patience. In the meantime, people take turns sleeping so that listening never stops. The room keeps its low light and its even breath. Outside, Earth turns. Somewhere, dawn walks its thin line across rooftops. Somewhere, evening tucks fields under a blue lid. Far above, the telescope keeps its station in deep shade. A small flower of gold mirrors drinking a river of starlight, one photon at a time. The numbers march, then stroll, then pause, like travelers who trust the road but also love the view. Near the end of the shift, the senior engineer writes one more sentence in the night log, pointed slightly off ring plane. Cadence thinned. Return strengthened. Beneath that, a second hand adds, if meaning lives here, it keeps good manners. There is a smile in the words, but also a boundary. Good manners do not prove a guest is human. They only make you want to keep the door open. The lights dim a shade more as screens slip into a blue meant for eyes that need rest. The whisper keeps its place at the edge of the graph, a slim ridge that refuses to flatten. In another room, a backup drive chirps and sleeps. In the hall, an exit sign glows like a tiny comet that never moves. Everything is steady. Everything is small and dear. The documentary voice lowers as if laying a blanket across a child. What happens when you point the instrument slightly off the ring plane? The room has answered. The signal listens and replies in its quiet way. What happens when doubt takes the chair beside wonder? The room has answered that too. People stay kind. Numbers stay honest. The breath of the night stays slow. The ringed fortress turns without hurry. The hush around it holds. A last look at the board. Repeat, verify, breathe. Someone caps the marker and sets it down with care, as if sound itself could bruise the moment. The screens glow on. The small moons of the room keep their low orbits. The whisper does not fade. It leans against the edge of perception, gentle and sure, like a hand resting on a door you are not ready to open. The glow softens, the steps grow quiet, and in the cradle of silence, the instruments keep listening, while in that listening, the silence seems to listen back. Saturn turns like a slow bell, and around it, the rings sweep in pale arcs, bright where sunlight strikes, dim where shadow passes like a soft hand. Along these arcs move the shepherd moons, small, careful keepers whose gravity gathers and guides. They are not loud. They do not claim the stage, but with every orbit they tug the lanes, nudge the edges, and keep order in a crowded sea of ice. The telescope holds its calm gaze across the ring plane, its mirror drinking light with patient stillness. Tonight's listening is tuned to edges, to penumbras where brightness thins and returns, to places where a moon shadow brushes the rings like a fingertip on a harp string. The anomaly, the shy visitor that has lingered for nights, answers to these edges. When the line of sight leans into shadow, the whisper grows a shade stronger, as if it prefers to speak from the half-light. The documentary voice lowers to a bedtime hush. Imagine the shepherds as beads on invisible wires. Pan and Daphnis race through narrow gaps, leaving ripples in their wake. Prometheus and Pandora glide along the thin F-ring, pulling strands of ice into braids and wisps. Mimas hums a deeper bass line, its gravity writing rhythms at a distance. Each moon keeps time, and together they shape the lanes the way tides shape a shoreline. Not by force alone, but by repetition, gentle, persistent, exact enough to be trusted. A simple picture helps. Consider a ring particle, a chip of ice the size of a pebble, or a house moving in a near-perfect circle. Now add a shepherd moon nearby. Each time the particle and the moon line up in the same place, the moon tugs. If the tug comes at the same point in the particle's orbit, again and again, the small push grows into a clean change. A gap opens. An edge sharpens. This is orbital resonance, a law with the kindness of a lullaby. 1 for every 2, 2 for every 3, small fractions that keep large order. The team sketches these fractions on a whiteboard, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 5 to 3, like notes on a staff. They mark where each shepherd's influence should draw lines in the rings. Then they place the telescopes pointing along one such line and let the spectrograph listen. The whisper is not a shout. It is a breath that returns and rests. But tonight, it leans toward places where moon shadows drift. As a shepherd passes between sun and ring, it casts a thin, moving shade. The shade cools the ice a little, changes the charge a little, and nudges the way dust lifts and settles. Electricity in a quiet sea can act like a bow on a string. The bow does not make the music. It lets the string sing. Across a quiet console, a graph begins to breathe. The cadence that once felt formless now shows the smallest courtesy of pattern, a soft rise as the shadow approaches, a pause as it crosses, a fading echo after it passes. It is not perfect, not a machine's tick. It is a human hum with nature's edges firm and tension softened by weather. Engineers write times, and those times line up with the shepherd's track. Not every passage, not with rigid precision, but often enough to draw an outline around chance. The narration keeps the signs plain. Gravity shapes the lanes. Tidal forces stretch and soothe. Magnetic fields curve through space like strings, and charged dust rides those strings up and down, in and out of the plane, to make faint spokes that come and go like breath on glass. Where a moon moves through this web, this loom of fields and ice, it can shift the threads in ways that instruments can hear. The shift might be the entire story, or it might be the stage on which a thinner story plays. A modulation, a hand resting lightly on nature's shoulder. Webb's operators try a cautious sweep along the ring edge, stepping the line of sight across a boundary like toes testing shallow water. At each step, they pause, count pulses, measure interval spacing, and move again. A pattern emerges that is more polite than bold. The anomaly strengthens near the shadow's forward edge, relaxes within the darkest band, and returns just after the shadow slips away, as if what matters is not darkness itself, but the change into and out of it. Edges, not middles. Transitions, not plateaus. In many systems, meaning hides at the border where one state becomes another. Here the border is light's angle and a moonlet's passing shade. Shepherd moons, the keepers, do more than cast shadows. Their gravity corrals ice into narrow streams. In the F-ring, this corralling looks like braids and knots, features that tighten and loosen as the shepherds pass. At certain times, when orbits align just so, the braids pull thin strands outward. Those strands catch sunlight like fishing lines at dawn. The telescope watches these times with care. It finds the whisper leaning closer again, not loudly, not always, but with a patience that adds weight to the map the team is drawing. Maps of timing are added to maps of place. The anomaly's intervals, the spaces between its quiet pulses, are laid over the predicted crossings of small moons and over the expected moments when dust is most likely to lift. The matches are never perfect. Nature likes to smear edges with weather and time. But there is a modest choir of agreement, enough to give the shepherds a seat near the front of the suspect table. The voice in the room stays measured. Correlation, not yet cause. A small experiment is planned and executed without haste. The telescope tilts a fraction to watch ahead of a shepherd shadow, then lingers to watch behind it. If the whisper is tied to the bowing of field lines by charged dust, then the attack and decay of the sound should follow the shadow's entrance and exit, not its center. The data return like slow tides pulled by a far moon. The rise is gentlest at the front, rounder at the back, as if the system overshoots and then recovers. This rounded shape is natural in physics when a field resists change, like a spring that stretches and then finds home. A scene floats by like a dream, the shepherd gliding along its track, the ring edge breathing with it, the field lines flexing and relaxing like the ribs of a sleeping animal. The whisper is not loud enough to wake anything, only enough to make those watching lean forward, almost against their will. If it were only nature, it would be worthy. If it were more, it would not need to be louder to be real. The film does not choose. It honors both. We walk closer to the numbers with the soft solace of care. Fourier analysis, which turns time into a small music sheet, is applied again, now on segments tagged to shepherd passages. Certain notes brighten when a shepherd's shadow is near. Others dim. A sideband appears small, offset from the main rhythm by a fraction that matches the drift between the moon's period and the sampling cadence. It is a sign of modulation, one signal riding on the back of another. Radios use this trick. So does nature when two processes meet. The sideband does not say message. It says mixing, and mixing has many parents. A young analyst draws two curves on tracing paper and slides them together until the peaks make sense. An older colleague smiles and sets a weight on the paper to keep it from shifting old tools for new light. They try removing the shepherd's timing from the data, subtracting its beat from the whisper to see what remains. The residue is thinner, but not gone. The shepherds amplify the visitor. They do not create it from silence. Like a good hall for a quiet song, they make the chords clearer without writing the notes. At the console, someone murmurs, "It likes the penumbra." The penumbra is the place between day and night, where light is not fully present, not completely absent. In the ring plane, penumbra moves like a slow river twist around a stone. Thus there may charge and discharge more easily. Field lines may flex with less stiffness, and the system may become, for a moment, more willing to sing. The whisper's own cadence seems to prefer these moments. It is as if a patient voice sought out corners of the room to speak from, avoiding the center where attention is brightest. Outside, Earth sleeps and wakes in waves, but the telescope's world holds steady. The shepherd moons keep their loops, never hurried, always on time by the long clock of gravity. Their shadows cross and recross the ring light, thin brushes on a wide canvas. In the team's shared folder, a plot is saved with a new label, Shadow Cross Modulation Candidate. No banners, just a file name that will sit beside hundreds of others, a small bead on a string. The narration glides back to the rings themselves. Every gap has a story. Some are kept clear by a moon. Some are kept clear by rhythm alone, a place where no particle can settle because each lap brings a nudge that adds up. If you were writing music with gravity, you could place beats at these gaps and let the system carry them sound without air, music in brightness instead of pressure. The thought is beautiful. The thought is also speculation. The film holds it lightly and sets it down. A gentle reminder returns. Nature is generous with patterns that look spoken. River deltas draw branching trees that could be alphabets. Fir needles under frost arrange as if by calligraphy. Lightning deserts the sky in letters none can read. To tell messenger from mirage, you look for intense signature, repetition that survives season and angle, structure that does not melt under new tests, a grammar that can be shared and predicted. The shepherd's study is one such test. It has not closed the case, but it has narrowed the room where answers can hide. The engineers slowed the pace near shift's end, letting the telescope settle back to a baseline view where the ring plane is bright and shadows are few. The whisper remains, but softened. It is no longer leaning on a moon shade. It floats above the lane like a breath you can see only when the air is cold. The contrast reminds them that the shepherds do not own the song. They only shape its loudness here and there. Somewhere, someone underlines a note. Not an asteroid, not a comet, not ordinary interference, edge preference confirmed. You lie back in your mind and drift. A moonlit slides through a gap like a pearl on a silk thread. Field lines, invisible but real, curve in long arcs that would take hours to trace by hand. Ring particles brush and part, each contact a small kindness that keeps the crowd smooth. The camera of the mind moves with the shepherd's shadow across a pale lane, and in the soft dark, a faint echo gathers resolve. It is easy to think of music here. It is also right to remember that the music might be nature playing alone, or nature hosting a guest. On the console, the last plots of the night line up in tidy rows. A pattern whispers from the edges, then quiets, then returns, always a little different, always polite. The keepers have done their work. They have guided the eyes to places where the system chooses to speak. Whether it is a speech or a sigh remains unsaid. This is the beauty of edges. They show you where to look without telling you what you will see. The lights dim a fraction. The ringed fortress turns with the calm of an ancient traveler. The shepherd moons glide along their lanes, their shadows painting and erasing, painting and erasing. The signal-shy, deliberate keeps time with no one and yet with everything. The glow fades to a thread, the thread to a point. The voice leaves you with a breath held in the quiet, where the smallest motion can feel like meaning. And in that held breath, the silence deepened. Yet hidden in that silence was something waiting to be understood. Night smooths itself over the ringed world. In the quiet, the graphs glow like shorelines seen from far above, clean, pale, and patient. The team leans near the light. If there is meaning in the whisper near Saturn, it will not show itself by shouting. It will come as structure, a rhythm inside a rhythm, a set of steps you can learn, then test, then trust. The documentary voice keeps its lantern low. Patterns start with counting. First come intervals, the spaces between pulses. Then come shapes, the way the pulses rise and fall. Then come rules, the numbers that might sit underneath like bones. The analysts line up nights of data and mark each pulse with a thin gray line, careful as tallies on a wall. The eye sees a hint of order, clusters, soft repeats, a few steady gaps. Hints are not proof. Proof asks for tools. Fourier analysis is that tool. It turns time into a small music sheet. Each hidden note becomes a spike, each steady beat a clean hill on a new axis. The team feeds the pulses into the transform and waits. The screen draws a landscape lowland where the random lives, and narrow mountains where regular steps stand. A ridge lifts above the plain. A second ridge rises, offset by a simple fraction. The room does not cheer. Someone only breathes out and writes the value and its error in a notebook. Window functions follow, gentle as filters over lamps. Hamming, Han, Blackman soft names for soft edges. Windows keep the analysis from ringing like a bell that was struck too hard. Each window is a shape laid over the data before the transform, so beginnings and ends do not pretend to be part of the signal. The team tries several, to be sure the ridges are not tricks of sharp cuts. The ridges remain, lowered a little, but there. Error bars are drawn like small arms around each point, honest and kind. Where the arms overlap, the team refuses to overclaim. Where they separate, the team leans closer. The narration keeps the science in simple words. Think of a drum. If you tap it evenly, a steady tone appears. If you add a second tap, close but not the same, beats emerge soft, rising and falling when two steps meet. In the data, that soft rise and fall shows up as sidebands, small twins around the main peak. Sidebands mean mixing. Mixing can happen when a shepherd moon's timing brushes the whisperer's own timing, or when two natural processes share the same room. Sidebands can also carry information, like radio on a carrier wave. The graph does not say which story is true. It only says softly that more than one rhythm is here. A statistician draws lines with a calm hand. Signal to noise, she says, pointing to a number just above a threshold written weeks ago on the board. False alarm probability, she adds, shading a region where luck could pretend to be law. The false alarm stays small when many nights are stacked. It grows when nights are pulled apart. That is honest too. Nature rarely gives everything at once. To guard against believing what they want to see, the team builds surrogates fake data with the same average brightness, the same slow trends, the same noise color, but no real beat inside. They run the same transforms. In the fakes, ridges wobble and break. In the real data, the ridges hold. Not rigid, not perfectly straight, but firm in a way fakes struggle to copy. Someone writes robust to shuffle in the margin and draws a small star next to it, not for celebration, but to mark where attention should return tomorrow. A new test asks whether intervals hide simple math. They fold the pulse times against small primes, 2, 3, 5, 7, checking whether pulses keep landing in the same bins after each fold. A weak preference appears at a ratio near 3 to 2, the kind a natural resonance would love. Another weak echo appears at a count that feels like 5. Patterns like these can grow out of gravity's long patience. They can also be chosen by minds that want to be found. The voice stays careful. Patterns are not messages. Patterns are seeds. Meaning is a tree that takes many tests to grow. The cadence thickens when the telescope looks near edges, then thins away from them. That much is known. Now the ridges hint at arithmetic tucked inside the thickness itself. The team draws a quiet diagram, a carrier rhythm set by ring geometry, a slower wave from shepherd shadows, a third, softer touch that shifts the center of each pulse a hair to the left, then a hair to the right, as if breathing. Stack those three, and the pattern looks almost spoken. Pull them apart, and each looks ordinary again. Assemble and disassemble, an engineer says with a smile. If it only speaks when the room is arranged, then the room matters. The film lingers on the idea of error bars, because they are the gentle truth-tellers of science. Each bar says, we know the center, and we know how unsure we are. Too many bars are pride. Too few are fear. The team draws them everywhere on heights, on widths, on frequencies, so the eye cannot run away with the story. Even with arms open wide, some points refuse to overlap. Those are the places where the forbidden pattern holds its ground. The phrase forbidden pattern is not dark. It is precise. In spectroscopy, some lines are forbidden in the sense that they do not occur under simple rules, only under rarer conditions. Here, the word is borrowed to mean a structure we do not expect from the common songs of rings and wind. The structure is slight, arithmetic that appears and dissolves, a ghost of counting on the edge of nature's breath. When it shows, the heartbeat of the plot grows smooth. When it fades, the points look like snow. The team tests drift. If a source moves, its beat can stretch and squeeze. They fit for a slow drift rate, as if the drummer were walking toward in a big, quiet room. A small correction sharpens the ridge. The correction is within what a shepherd's field might cause. It is also within what a hidden conductor plasma strings near the bow shock might add. The correction does not choose a parent. It only makes the line easier to read. In a corner, a graduate student writes a pair of questions on a sticky note. What if this wasn't just rock and ice? What if it was a message, drifting closer every night? The note is left by a monitor, pink against the gray. The room sees it and says nothing. Not because the questions are bad, but because they are precious, and precious things are handled slowly here. Window by window, the team checks that no choice of method is forcing the story. Rectangular windows ring. Tapered windows soothe. Long windows improve frequency resolution but blur time. Short windows do the opposite. Each choice is a trade. In all, the main ridges remain. The sidebands breathe. The forbidden spacing at the heart of the cone flickers between strong and shy, like a lighthouse seen through snow. The narration folds us into sleep-friendly images. Think of the pattern as a tide. It rises in Fourier space when observations gather at the right angles. It ebbs when geometry goes dull. On a chalkboard, someone sketches concentric rings for radius, spokes for phase, small triangles for window length. The picture looks like a child's drawing of a windmill and a flower at once. It is honest to the work, patient, a little playful, exact where it matters. A check against known libraries continues. Pulsar harmonics, no luck. Quasi-periodic oscillations from accretion disks. Too fast, too hot, and not in this part of the sky. Ring spokes, near, but without the thin arithmetic that peaks and hides here. Aurora, powerful but broad and tied to the sun's temper. The forbidden pattern sits between, borrowing edges from each, wearing none completely. To see if the structure is born of sampling, an alias made by our own cadence, the team staggers observation times on a later night. If the ridges were fakes from a fixed schedule, they would slide or break. They do not. They ripple a little, as all living signals do, and they return. The whiteboard gains a small line, aliasing unlikely. They test phase coherence, a quiet measure of whether the signal keeps its place under the curve or wanders like a leaf on a pond. The coherence holds over minutes, weakens over hours, returns over nights. This rhythm steady, then loose, then steady matches a system that is natural at core, but modulated. A conductor could do that. So could geometry that changes just enough with each shadow, each field line bowed by a slow wind. The voice stays gentle about fear. Fear of being wrong. Fear of saying too much. Fear of missing a true hello because caution felt safer. To keep fear small, the team writes down rules for what would count as spoken. Rule 1. Repetition that survives new angles. Rule 2. Counts that land on simple numbers across months. Rule 3. Structure that persists when the natural carriers are modeled and removed. Tonight, the forbidden pattern meets none of these rules fully. It brushes them and steps back. That is not failure. That is the sky asking for more time. A pause. The camera of the mind drifts to the rings, bright as chalk on black slate. In the brightness, the voice imagines a lighthouse big as a world and exoplanet-scale beacon sweeping in long arcs. Or a chorus near a black hole, but so far away that only its echo leaks through. These are dream shapes, bedtime thoughts held lightly. The film offers them and then lets them float away, the way we let clouds change without choosing one to be a ship or a mountain for too long. Back at the console, someone overlays 2 months of data and smooths the curve with a kernel gentle as a thumb on paper. The forbidden spacing thickens in the combined plot. It is not a wall. It is a walkway narrow, sometimes broken, but there. The walkway leads between known peaks, into a small courtyard where the numbers feel almost like words. Almost. They check their own minds. Confirmation bias is a quiet current that can carry a boat off course. To fight it, a different group in the team is given the data with labels removed. They do their own transforms, their own windows, their own tests. Days later, they return with plots that echo the first group's plots like distant mountains echo each other at dusk. People do not hug here. They share a look that means we are not alone with this. Evening and morning pass on Earth, while Webb remains in its cold, steady night. The pattern does not bloom into a declaration. It keeps a soft poise. On the final plot of the shift, the main ridge stands, the sidebands breathe, and the arithmetic inside the cone flickers, promising but shy. The analysts set thresholds for the next run. Higher cadence, longer baseline, finer angle steps near penumbra. The plan is simple and good. The plan is sleep. The voice unwinds to a close. All remains, anchored to method. Fear stays soft at the edges. Light can be counted. Numbers can be kind. A forbidden pattern has lifted its head above the noise and looked back, not bold, not coy, simply present. If it is only nature, then nature has found a new way to play with dust and field and shadow, and we will learn the tune with time. If it is more, then patience is still the path. Meaning does not fear waiting. The last screen dims a shade. Someone caps a pen and sets it beside the notebook where error bars have gathered like careful fences. The ringed world turns without hurry. The whisper keeps its quiet course, a brush stroke across the sky that thickens at each pass. The glow in the room fades to a thread, and the thread to a point, but the question does not fade with it. It stays like a small light behind the eyes, gentle and sure. reminding every watcher that the night is wide. The numbers are faithful, and in the drifting quiet, one could almost sense that another secret was about to reveal itself. Night leans closer to the ringed world, and the room grows quiet enough to hear the small sounds of breathing and keys. The whisper at Saturn has learned our patience. Now people who study communication take their turn. They speak softly, like librarians of signal and noise. Their rules are simple. If something wishes to be found, it repeats. If it wishes to be understood, it chooses structure that minds can share. They begin with the simplest code of all, on and off. A pulse is on. A pause is off. Strings of on and off can build numbers and words. The team lays the recent pulses along a line and marks each as a short or a long, like dots and dashes on an old wire. Nothing clean jumps out. The dots and dashes won't sit still. Lengths stretch and shrink the way voices do when the speaker turns their head. Not noise, but not a tidy telegraph either. So they try counting space, not height. If pauses come in special size, prime steps like 2, 3, 5, 7, then even a shy messenger might be waving hello. A mile preference appears at 3 to 2, the same fraction the ring shepherds love. Another at 5 shows up, then fades. The scientists smile without celebrating. Nature makes fractions too. Rivers branch in 2s and 3s. Planets lock into simple rhythms. A mind could choose those rhythms on purpose, but a mind is not required. To keep thinking clear, they fold the data into layers. First, they remove the slow tide of ring geometry, the rise and fall that any observer would hear near edges. Then they subtract the timing of shepherd shadows, which lift and lower the whisper like hands dipping a tray. What remains is thinner, but not erased. A delicate ladder of intervals returns, the way a path returns after wind stops pushing sand. Scaffold. Someone writes in the margin. The word is careful. A scaffold holds shape, but it is not the house. Communication lives in frequency as well as time. Spectrograph channels separate light by pitch the way a piano separates notes. Narrowband signals stow their power in a tight strip like a single key pressed and held. Broadband signals spread across many keys at once like a hand laid flat. The team measures the whisper's spread. It leans narrow near ring edges, then loosens when the telescope steps away. Not as needle-thin as a laser, not as foggy as a storm. Constrained, the note says. Prefers a lane. They compared this with a lesson about on-ascenders. A true messenger would repeat a pattern over many nights, not only when conditions are perfect. The group draws 3 rules on the board, each in small letters. Repeat, confirm, share. Repeat. The pattern circles back across time. Confirm. It survives new angles. Share. It can be guessed, then predicted. Tonight, the whisper repeats enough to earn another night. It confirms along edges more than elsewhere. It shares just enough for hope to sketch a simple alphabet, then erases its chalk with a sleeve. Algorithms are invited to dream, but only after they are taught to doubt. The team uses models that can learn from examples without inventing what is not there. They start small. Look for equal steps. Look for pairs. Look for clusters that keep a constant center while their edges breathe. The algorithms find a lattice as fine as thread. Then the team shuffles the data, breaks time order, and tries again. The lattice weakens in shuffle. In the real stream, it returns. Not strong, not boastful present. Another group tests run length encoding, the way old machines save space by counting repeats. If pulses often come in 2s, 3s, or 5s, the counts themselves might be the message. The result is murky. 2s and 3s appear more than chance on edge-pointed nights, less on others. 5s play shy. Nature is like that. Law at the center, weather at the edge. A messenger might ride the weather to hide and still leave breadcrumbs. Or perhaps there is no rider, only the weather, rich enough to feel personal. They keep their language kind and plain. Imagine a choir in a big room. If the choir sings one clear note, your ear knows it right away. If the room is full of echoes, you still know the note by its steadiness. But if the singers walk while they sing, turning corners and breathing at different times, your ear works harder. That is where we are. The whisper may be a single note shaken by a moving room. Or it may be two notes meeting, making beats where they cross. Or it may be a lone singer who sometimes stops to listen. To learn how frequency changes with time, they draw a spectrogram. Time on one axis, pitch on the other, brightness for strength. As Webb's line of sight glides past penumbra and back, the spectrogram shows a thin thread that wavers and returns, a stitch that appears where edges live. In moments, the thread splits two close lines, then one again. That split is a hint of modulation, one rhythm riding another, the way a radio station rides a carrier wave. Modulation is everywhere in nature: wind over a bottle, tires on a ribbed road. It is also a friendly vehicle for meaning. They test a simple alphabet that uses distance between pulses to mark numbers 1 through 9. Nights stacked together give a small rise in counts near 1, 2, 3, then a fall. The rise is not loud. It would not pass in a courtroom, but it keeps returning near the ring-edge geometry. The team writes weak positional structure and circles at once. A second circle would be too much. Equally important is what they do not find. No sharp banner of primes. No clean binary header that says start in any common scheme. No precise parity bit that flips like a metronome to check integrity. If a mind is present, it is not eager to be graded by our old textbooks. If nature alone is singing, she's enjoying a rich scale that instruments only learned to hear a decade ago. They honor the possibility of silence. The ethical note from earlier chapters remains. Do not shout into a room you have only begun to map. If a reply is ever sent, it must be small, delayed, and careful. Tonight, they only ask questions of the data they already have. They refuse to light a beacon. They believe listening can be active without becoming loud. Human feelings arrive gently because they belong here. Hope flickers when two nights line up, a rhythm rising where a shepherd's shadow crosses. Awe sits still when a sideband appears and stays for an hour. Fear of being wrong taps lightly. What if this is an alias from our sampling, a mirror we made ourselves? To answer, they stagger the schedule again, alter the cadence, widen the window. The ridges shift a little, then settle in the same place. The mirror does not follow. The room exhales. A young scientist whispers, almost to themselves, "Would a true messenger repeat?" A senior voice answers as if telling a bedtime story. Yes, and it would repeat in a way that survives weather. Not every cycle. Enough that you can say, "There, that part holds." They write down a threshold for the months ahead. If the scaffold can be predicted with small error across many angles, it crosses a line from pretty to telling. They measure coherence, a number that says whether phases keep company across time. The coherence holds best over minutes near penumbra, then weakens, then heals. The plot looks like breathing. Breathing can be a machine with duty cycles. It can be plasma in a field. It can be a singer finding air. All three fit. None win the day. Back to basics. Noise. Noise wears colors white, pink, brown, depending on how power falls across frequencies. The whisper sits on pinkish ground, the kind nature favors. They model that ground carefully so small peaks do not look larger than they are. After the model is subtracted, the peaks shrink, but they do not vanish. Honest graphs can still be kind. Even the room learns to speak softly. People trade chairs without scraping the floor. Cups are set down like eggs. The quiet is not superstition. It is a way to respect concentration. A single sharp sound won't break a signal from Saturn, but it can break a thought that was close to being tested. Late in the shift, they try a toy cipher, not to claim, but to learn. Take the intervals and map them to letters by order, shortest to A, next to B, and so on. What appears is a string that looks like any string. No hidden word. No, hello. Someone laughs, kindly, at their own wish. Then someone else turns the same mapping into shapes, a sequence of squares and circles on a grid. The shapes cluster near a diagonal, as if the same few differences keep returning. They save the picture with a plain name and move on. The film keeps the science at a 6th grade ease. Narrowband versus broadband. A whistle versus surf. Spectrograph channels. Notes on a keyboard. Encoding schemes. Ways to pack meaning into steps. All this lives under one simple idea. Repetition you can trust. And trust grows slowly. Nights must pile like pages until the thread holds when you press your thumb against it. As the last data block arrives, the team sets their plan. More passes near the penumbra. Longer watches across shepherd crossings. A few trials at slightly different wavelengths to see if the whisper prefers one color of light over another. They will not send. They will not call out. They will listen better. In the dim, someone places a hand on the back of a chair and leaves it there, as if to steady a friend. If we are hearing an unknown traveler, they say, what would we say back? No one answers out loud. Answers live in careful. Rules in ethics that prefer patience, in methods that ask the same question many ways and accept the quiet when it comes. The graphs begin to fade to idle blues. The ringed fortress turns. The shepherds keep their lanes. The whisper, still polite, breathes in a cadence that feels like a patient breath beneath a gentle veil. Maybe it is a natural symphony we have never named. Maybe it is a voice borrowing the orchestra of dust and field. The room does not decide. It does not need to decide tonight. A small ritual ends the work. Files are signed, logs are closed, a line is drawn under the date. Someone opens a window shade and lets a thin line of dawn in, a reminder that Earth keeps its own steady rhythm. The light touches a clear bottle on a shelf, a gift from an old colleague. The scientist who notices smiles and sets a thought inside it, quiet and clean, a question without a claim, a map without a border. They place the bottle back and step away. Outside, the sky pales. Inside, screens rest like lakes before wind. The whisper remains on disk and in minds, a thread stretched across hours and care. No salute, no drumroll, only a simple faith in repetition and a gentle promise to return. The world takes a slow breath. The room answers. And in that breath, like a message tucked into a tide and left to travel on its own, something small and bright floats outward into the cradle of silence, while the silence, vast and kind, seems to hold room for an answer that has not yet learned thy name. Night folds neatly over the ringed world, and the room lowers its voice. The whisper near Saturn has grown familiar, never loud, always polite. Before any hand reaches for a transmitter, the team turns to the oldest guide they know. Caution. The documentary voice moves softly, like a lantern held low along a path. There is a difference between hearing and answering. Tonight is about that difference. They begin with first principles written in small, clear words on a whiteboard. Do no harm. Share the sky. Check again. These are not laws carved in stone. They are habits shaped by history. When pulsars were first heard, some thought they were greetings. When quasars blazed, their flicker looked like a beacon. When fast radio bursts arrived, they felt like knocks at a door. In time, careful work showed natural engines behind those wonders. All remained. So did humility. The team reviews quiet protocols spoken of in many observatories. If a signal might be more than noise, gather more data. Invite outside ears. Keep transmissions off. If talk must ever be sent, let it be small, delayed, and agreed upon by many who share the sky. No one owns the heavens. Listening is a right. Speaking is a responsibility. The room walks through risks in a kind tone, simple enough for anyone to hold. Risk of false alarm, the loudest risk. People love stories, and a story can run faster than a graph. If a claim rises too fast, trust falls even faster. Risk of interference. A reply, even weak, could add noise to a delicate place in space. Instruments working on other targets might suffer from a call sent in haste. Risk of misunderstanding. A pattern that looks like code might only be nature's handwriting, and turning it into speech could turn science into rumor. So they plan the quiet way. No broadcast, a line reads. Only listen more patient, more precise. Ground partners are invited to watch the same geometry near the ring edges and penumbras. The telescope schedule is trimmed to fit longer, gentler passes across the scenes that favor the whisper. Telemetry safeguards are checked, data paths redundant, clock sensed, error flags clear. If a story is to be told, it will be told by many eyes together. They talk about triangulation. It is a simple idea with careful steps. Watch the same event from more than one angle. If the source sits near the rings, a slight parallax should reveal its place. If it sits far beyond, the place will hold steady while angles change. They arrange a round of coordinated time slots with observatories that can see Saturn from different longitudes on Earth. The team agrees to share raw data with light touch, no grand labels. No dramatic names, just timestamps, frequencies, and brightness. Let the numbers speak in many rooms. A calm voice explains why waiting is courage. In science, patience is not a pause. It is a method. Each new observation is a knot that ties the story tighter. When the knots hold, we can lean. When they slip, we are spared embarrassment. The team writes a small reminder near the board's edge. We are not late. We are careful. To keep the tone clear, they revisit old teachers. A thin recording plays of radio, waves from Jupiter's storms, howls, and whistles that would feel like language if you did not know better. Another recording follows, a translated pulsar clock, steady as a heartbeat made of thunder. Then a clip of an FR Buckwick, bright, done like a pebble flicked at a lake. Each taught us something after we chose to wait. Each felt like an omen at first. Each became a lesson in nature's range. The ethics widened to include Earth. Suppose someone says that a true messenger does exist and expects a reply. What would we say that all humans could accept as fair? No single team should send on behalf of everyone. If a reply ever leaves our planet, it should carry that planet's consent in a form as honest as we can make it. That means time and councils and more than one language of both words and math. It means the first message might be nothing more than a respectful tone, a small repeated count meant to say, we hear, we wait, we mean no harm. In the meantime, the only message is care. Care in calibration. Care in logging. Care in not cherry-picking the nights that flatter the idea you already like. Engineers review the path of data from mirror to memory. Photons to charge, charge to counts, counts to files. Every link in the chain is checked for places where a weak hum could turn into a strong claim. Where bias could slip in, a second person checks. Where code could fold a curve into a peak, a different script is used. The room is not trying to be clever. It is trying to be honest. An ethicist joins the late shift by video, the face quiet in a small frame. They speak in words a child could keep. Listening is safe. Listening teaches. Answering is a promise. promises deserve time. No vote is taken because no one asks to break the rule that already holds. The telescope will not broadcast. It will not beam a call into the ring plane. It will not whisper into the dark. It will stay a listener. Triangulation runs begin. When Earth turns, a partner array picks up a faint flutter that matches a rise in the main instrument's plot. The timing is not perfect. Clouds at one site make a gap. An antenna at another site needs a small repair. Still, the overlap is good enough to put new pins in the map. The suspected place is not a comet tail or a far nebula. It hugs the ring geometry like a careful swimmer following a pool's lane line. The team marks this without claiming too much. Local to Saturn environment probable. The narration offers a picture. Imagine a lantern cupped in two hands. The lantern is the data-warm, flickering, fragile. The hands are the procedures that keep wind from blowing the flame askew. You do not toss a lantern to a friend across a dark field. You carry it together and walk close. A list grows, not of suspects now, but of protections. Cross-checks at different wavelengths, so no clever aliasing can fool a single band. Repeats across many days, so storms of space weather do not impersonate structure. Quiet nights reserved for deep looks when geometry is best. A small pilot test with a different instrument mode to see if the whisper prefers another way of being measured. Each item is a small stitch in a seam that must not tear. The voice moves through history again in a soft glide. There were times when we rushed, a false face on Mars drawn by light and shadow. Canals that were only the eye's wish. Signals and old antennas that turned out to be pigeons or hot parts cooling, or the hum of our own devices. We remember these kindly, not to mock, but to stay humble. We also remember the triumphs that patience carried. The first radio pulse of a pulsar traced across months. The slow curve of a planet around a star measured by tiny steals of light. The whisper of gravitational waves caught only after detectors learned how to sit still enough to hear. The scale here, the faint polite rhythm near Saturn, belongs with the long work. It does not want a leap. It wants a chair pulled up close and time kept well. Someone asks, in a tone like a lullaby, what would make us certain enough to draft a reply? The answers come from method, not romance. If the structure repeats across seasons and angles. If its timing can be predicted and met within narrow errors. If a grammar appears that is not explained by known fields, dust or moons, and that grammar holds when we remove their effects. If others far away hear the same thing and say, yes, that part endures. These are not doors that swing open easily. That is the point. Another gentle rule is written, no lone hero. The story of the sky is a relay, not a sprint. If a paper ever announces the visitor as more than nature, it will carry many names and even more footnotes. It will name the places that checked, and the nights that did not behave, and the methods that failed along the way. Pride is not the enemy. Haste is. A technician, still and careful, reviews the safety of any future active test. If, much later, a handshake is attempted, it should be a feather touch, a passive light curve change, maybe, not a bright beam. A count whispered into a band that nature already uses, so new noise is not born. A test that shuts itself off if any instrument nearby begins to see harm. The plan is academic for now, but writing it brings calm. Knowing what careful could look like helps the room stay patient when the mind races ahead. The whisper keeps its steady courtesy. It does not grow bold. It does not fade to nothing. It remains a fold in light, a cadence that prefers edges, a rhythm that breathes more clearly when a shepherd passes. The team lowers the thrill and lifts the craft. Triangulation plots are taped to the wall. A list of outside groups who have agreed to watch sits by the phone. An email draft is saved that says only, "We continue to see a structured feint, Persistent phenomenon local to Saturn's ring environment. Data attached. Thoughts welcome. Calm spreads like a low tide. A student writes in a notebook, "If a reply is wisdom, waiting is courage." It looks like a line for a poem, but it is also a procedure. Waiting keeps hands off switches that are not needed. Waiting keeps claims soft while the truth hardens. Waiting allows the night to show more sides of itself. Night edges forward. Screens dim to a gentler blue. The telescope holds its shade. The planet turns its wide face, ring shadows slipping like soft bands. In one corner, a small monitor shows error bars shrinking on a plot labeled coherence over angle. In another, a timeline of planned observations curls like a paper road across weeks. The plan is not a wall. It is a promise to return with open ears. The documentary voice draws us toward rest. Ethics, here, are not heavy. They are light and steady, like the touch that keeps a violin in tune. We do not stop wonder. We set it to a tempo that truth can keep. We do not forbid hope. We ask it to walk with care. We do not seal the door. We fit it with a window and sit beside it, listening for footsteps that might be wind, might be a friend, might be both. The lantern of the room dims another notch. Someone places a cover over a keyboard as if tucking it in. A soft chime marks the end of a run. Files drift to safe places, duplicated and dated, their paths logged like stars on a chart. Outside the windows, Earth is quiet and blue. Far away, the ringed fortress holds its silence, and in that silence, a faint rhythm continues to breathe. No call goes out. No greeting leaves the dish. The only echo tonight is the echo inside the mind, where numbers become pictures and pictures become care. The glow at the edge of the graph narrows, then steadies like a candle seen through frosted glass. The room does not push. It does not close its eyes either. It keeps them open the way sailors do, soft, patient, and kind, trusting that the ocean says what it means when you give it time. The silence deepened, yet hidden in that silence was something waiting to be understood. The night tilts. Not much, just enough for a rare geometry to unfold. Saturn turns, the rings lean, and for a brief window, the plane of ice and dust opens like a keyhole. Light slides through a gap, the way dawn slips between curtains. The telescope settles into place. Its mirror drinks the dark. Its instruments hold their breath. This is the kind of alignment that textbooks mark with neat diagrams and small stars in the margin. Look here. The documentary voice is slow and calm. We are not rushing toward discovery. We are letting the sky arrange a gentle experiment. When rings tilt, shadows thin. When shadows thin, we can see through, not just across. One gap, one among many, becomes a narrow passage for starlight to thread. The names are simple and kind. Encke, Keeler, Cassini. They are resonance gaps, carved by moons and rhythm, polished by time. Tonight, one such gap turns from a line into a lens. A low angle of sunlight brushes the ring edges. The ice glows pale, like frost on a window at dawn. In this light, faint structures become visible. Clumps that drift, braids that loosen, spokes that rise and fade. The tilt lets Webb look past a curtain instead of staring at it. A hidden room reveals its corners. The whisper we have followed for nights responds as if it too has been waiting for the door to open. It brightens, not with a shout, but with the steady confidence of a candle carried into a hallway. The camera of your mind steps through that hallway. On one side, Saturn's cloud tops, banded and slow, wearing ring shadows like soft scarves. On the other, the rings themselves, not solid at all, but a million slow travelers pacing their lanes. Between them, the gap, a clean seam where dynamics are simple enough to model and strange enough to teach. Into this seam, light passes. Spectrographs catch it and arrange it along scales. Peaks settle into places that have wobbled for days. Background noise drops like snow falling out of a beam. The team speaks in soft terms that a sleepy mind can hold. A window is a time when geometry favors truth. A stable anchor is a frequency or a timing that stops sliding when you pick the right frame. Tonight, the anchors appear. The main ridge in Fourier space, which has drifted and breathed, becomes crisp as a coastline seen from a higher hill. Sidebands that came and went now sit like islands you can circle on a map. Error bars narrow, honest and modest, but narrower all the same. Why does the window help? Because light, when it passes through the ring plane, samples a thinner mix of dust and charge. Scattering lessens. The path stops changing as much with every small step and angle. The instrument hears fewer small arguments in the light and more of the one long sentence we hope to read. It is like listening to a choir after the doors are closed and the street noise is kept outside. The melody is not new. It is simply cleaner. The whisper answers to this clarity. Its cadence grows firmer at the edges of the gap and steadier across its center. The rise and fall that shadows once printed on the signal become gentle swells, like a lake breathing under a clear sky. The team lays the new curve over older curves. The match is not perfect. Nature keeps her soft irregularities, but a scaffold strengthens. 2 weak intervals that once traded places now hold rank. A spacing that hid under noise stands up and stays. The narration keeps the science plain. Resonance gaps are made when a moon's regular tug lines up with a particle's path again and again. Each tug is small. Together, they clear lanes and sharpen edges. Low-angle sunlight heightens contrast and reveals fine features. When Webb peers through such a gap, it removes a layer of confusion. From the measurement, fewer bounces, fewer charges passing from grain to grain, fewer tiny storms to smear the timing. The result is not magic. It is just a better room for listening. Instruments respond with a quiet happiness. The spectrograph's comb teeth stop jittering. A timing panel, once breathing like a sleeper who dreams, settles to a slower rise and fall. Background subtraction behaves. When the team applies the same windows and transforms as before, the main peak does not shift to follow method. Method follows it. This is the small pride of good nights. Your tools get out of the way, and the sky does the speaking. A second anchor appears in the numbers, a little harmonic that has been shy. It sits at a frequency that matches a simple fraction of the first, close to 3 to 2. It is stronger when the line of sight threads the gap than when it skims the ring edge. That fits what field models predict. The gap has less charged dust rising, so less mixing, so a cleaner carrier. The carrier may be natural or rhythm born of geometry. Or it may be a lamp someone is using, choosing a lane nature already lights. The film does not decide. It lets the options sit like 2 stones warmed by the same sun. The team cross-checks at once. A ground radio array has been watching a neighboring band. Its data, coarse but kind, show a small brightening that overlaps by time with Webb's rise. Another telescope, using a different instrument mode, sees the same cadence shift, less wobble, more hold. The phrase sable anchors moves from the whiteboard to the log. The log is a quiet place where facts go to rest in order. The camera leans into the gap. You can almost feel dust particles move like snow in slow water, lifting and settling under electric hands too gentle to see. Field lines drawn on models. As curved strings seem to run straighter here, or at least less tangled. If music travels these strings, it meets fewer knots. A bow drawn across them would speak with less fuzz, more tone. The whisper's tone responds, broader at the edges, clearer within the passage, like a flute sounding better in a room made for sound. Anchors found, the team checks that they are not tricks of the schedule. They slide the observation window by minutes and then by hours. The peaks stay. they switch window functions again. The peaks drop a little as expected but remain centered. They change bin sizes, try a different smoothing kernel, split the night into halves and compare. Split halves agree the way two halves of a shell agree. Not mirror perfect, but matching where it matters. With the geometry so kind, background noise behaves like a polite guest. Its color is pinkish, the way natural noise often is. The model for that noise, drawn like a low hill under the spectrum, sits lower tonight. When subtracted, it leaves a ridge that is not high but is honest. The ridge traces a path that the team can follow with a finger without lifting it. That's a small miracle in data work, the moment when your finger can stay on the signal and not lose it in the dots. The whisper brightens here, and something else happens. Its center stops wandering. Over earlier nights, the beat would drift, left and right by a hair, like a walker adjusting on a windy path. In the window, that drift shrinks. Phase coherence, how well the rhythm keeps its place in the cycle, improves over minutes and holds longer. The plot for coherence looks like an evening lake. Small ripples, long flat patches, a shore you can see. The voice does not raise itself with excitement. It speaks as if tucking you in. We have stable anchors. We have a cleaner view. We have fewer excuses to blame the instrument or the light. If the structure is natural, it is beautiful in a way. That invites modeling plasma strings plucked by moon or wind, singing through a lane cut by resonance and lit by low sun. If the structure is more if a messenger rides this instrument, then the messenger has chosen a wise stage, a quiet hall where even small notes carry. As the window holds, the team tries a careful sweep of wavelengths, not far, just enough to see if the cadence prefers one color of light. It does not vary wildly. That, too, is helpful. It suggests we are tracing brightness more than line chemistry timing cut into light level, not unique elements blinking. A narrowband messenger might hide in a color. This whisper sits on the general glow. Again, the film does not choose. It keeps both possibilities on the tray, so sleep can take them without worry. In quiet shots, hands draw over transparent plots, older nights in gray, tonight's in pale blue, tomorrow's plan in dotted lines. The gap is drawn as a narrow doorway. A small arrow notes sun angle low, another shepherd influence minimal, a third field model smoother. Some notes are crossed out, not because they were wrong, but because they are now less needed. This is how understanding grows, not by erasing the past, but by writing over it with finer pens. A question rises like mist. If the window makes the pattern clearer, what lies beyond the window? The team does not answer with words. They answer with a plan. After the alignment fades, they will follow the trajectory outward past the bright lanes, across the shadowed side, toward space where ring influence is thin and bow shock space begins. If the anchors hold there, the source is not the rings, but the neighborhood around them. If the anchors fail, the source may live in the plane itself, a music of dust and field that only becomes speech when sunlight leans just so. The telescope gathers a last set while the tilt remains kind. In the control room, the sound of keys is small and careful. Times are logged with a neat hand. The date, the angle, the mode, the gain each goes to its line. Someone underlines background noise reduced and adds a smile made of two short dashes and a curve. Even this tiny face is quiet, no circle. Just a suggestion, the way ring shadows are suggestions of lines on a planet's curve. Outside, the alignment begins to drift. The window closes as gently as it opened, the curtain sliding back over the gap. Light thickens across the plane. Spokes return like handwriting on glass. The whisper softens, but does not vanish. It moves. Back into the texture of the ringed sea, still there, still polite, waiting for the next night and the next angle to draw it out. The voice lowers. Stable anchors do not end a story. They give it footing. Tonight we stood on rock, not ice. The pattern held our weight. We looked through a keyhole and saw a room still dim, still spare, but with walls we can trace. Beyond those walls, a larger house waits. Moons, fields, and the region where solar wind turns to bow to a planet's magnetic shape. Out there, a hidden conductor might be waiting natural strings tuned by space itself. Or a traveler might be using those strings to speak. The graphs dim to gentle blue. Files rest in their folders like sheets stacked in a drawer. The rings turn back to being brushstrokes, the gap to a line, the planet to a pearl. In the calm, the mind drifts forward with the light, past ice and shadow into wider dark. The whisper recedes a little but does not leave. It becomes a memory carried on, like a note you can still hear after the instrument stops. The room exhales. Someone caps a pen, someone lights a small lamp on a desk, someone closes a notebook with a hand that lingers. The window is gone for now. The lesson stays. Geometry can be mercy. When we meet it with readiness, the universe answers with clarity. And as the glow fades to a thread and the thread to a point, the question remains gentle and sure. Like a tide under the surface, what waits beyond the bright lanes we have known? The silence does not say. It only steadies, wider and kinder than before, and in that widening quiet, one could almost sense that another secret was about to reveal itself. Night feels wider beyond the rings, as if space has taken a slow breath. The telescope tilts its attention outward, away from the bright lanes of ice, into the dim region where wind from the sun meets the planet's magnetic will. It is a borderland no fence, only changes. Here, the solar wind, thin and fast, slows down and bends. Here, Saturn's magnetosphere, broad and soft-edged, swells like a shield around an ancient traveler. Between them sits a boundary shaped by motion and field. People call it the bow shock. The documentary voice lays this out in simple words, the kind that rest well at bedtime. Imagine a boat moving through water. The boat pushes waves ahead of it. Those waves stack into a bow. Now swap water for particles, tiny bits of charged matter, streaming from the sun, and swap the boat for a planet wrapped in magnetism. The place where the wind first meets the shield is the bow shock. It is not a wall. It is a region where speed drops and directions fold, where pressure turns messy before it turns calm. The signal's path is traced like thread. Analysts follow it upstream from ring shadows, past shepherd lanes, through quiet gaps, and into the magnetic dawn where lines of force bend forward. They mark each rise of the whisper, each faint fall, and compare those marks with models of plasma flow. A pattern in the timing points outward, toward the shock's foamy edge. Upstream source favored, someone writes, the word small and careful. It is not proof. It is a direction. Here the science is picture-friendly. Magnetic field lines are like strings stretched through space. Charged particles, the solar wind, the planet's own ions slide along them like beads. When conditions are right, the strings can vibrate. A piece of the wind can pluck them. A change in pressure can bow them. A passing moonlit can add a quick, precise tug. Those vibrations travel. They can be heard not by ears, but by instruments that count light and timing. If the rings were a stage, the bow shock could be an orchestra pit hidden, busy, full of soft hands shaping sound. The telescope moves in small arcs, sampling just beyond the ringed fortress. It pauses near long lines of field predicted by the models. The whisper responds with a steadier cadence than before, still shy, still polite, but less prone to drift. Phase holds longer. The sidebands, once uncertain, now breathe with a rhythm that follows easier math. The team draws a box around the data and labels it bow shock alignment runs, a name only a technician could love. Inside that plain box, The curves look like music beginning to keep time. The voice guides the picture. Charged particles from the sun rush in like wind on a wire. Saturn's magnetosphere flattens on the day side and trails a long tail on the night side. Where the wind presses hardest, the shock forms. Downstream from the shock, field lines can tremble the way guitar strings do after a touch. If small moons, or even small clumps of ring matter that wander high, pass near the right lines, they can nudge the tremble. Add sunlight and shadow, and sometimes the nudge grows clear in the brightness we measure. A simple test follows. The team watches when a moonlet's known path skirts a line that models say is resonant, easy to pluck. The whisper's cadence gains a slight emphasis at those times, a rising shoulder, a lean in the interval spacing. It is not a drumbeat. It is a fingertip. Moonlit modulation consistent, the log says. The words hold steady without reaching too far. They push the model further. The bow shock is not smooth. It ripples like a flag. Plasma streams lace through it, thin and quick, then curl back. If those streams align with a field line that reaches toward the rings, the path for a vibration is cleaner. The team plots a map of likely conduit-scurved lanes from shock to inner magnetosphere. The whisper's stronger nights land along two of those lanes more often than chance. A faint connection takes shape, not a line you could draw with ink, but a path you could trace with a fingertip and a little faith. The narration stays soft, never letting metaphor outrun fact. Charged dust in the ring plane, lifted by sunlight and nursed by fields, can sing. Field lines, strummed by wind and changed by the planet's rotation, can carry that song. Moonlets can add accents. All of this is natural and lovely. It could be a symphony with no composer, only motion and law. But then there is the arithmetic that will not settle, the forbidden pattern that resists a full fit, the tiny counts that act like choices rather than accidents. The team brings fresh tools to the border. They measure something called Alphen speed, the pace at which a disturbance travels along a magnetic string. In the bow shock region, that speed changes with density and field strength. They line up the whisper's intervals with expected travel times along likely strings. Some intervals click into place with satisfying neatness. Others sit a half step off, like notes bent by a player who is either learning or hiding. A comm analyst draws a diagram a sixth grader would like. A big circle for Saturn, a ring around it like a halo, a smaller curved line in front for the bow shock. Arrows show wind. Loops show field lines. Dots mark moonlets. A path snakes from the shock, along a loop, toward the ring plane. She taps 3 places with a pencil pluck. Carry. Glow. If the sky plays itself, she says, these 3 steps would be enough. She adds a 4th dot, small and gray, or ride. The 4th dot stays unconnected, a suggestion rather than a claim. The cadence steadies with these passes. It is not rigid now. It is confident. Error bars narrow. Coherence stretches. In the plots, the forbidden spacing, the intervals that felt almost spoken, emerges, then braces itself against the noise. It is still shy, still a small thing in a large sea, but it is harder to dismiss. People sit back a little in their chairs. Hearts that had raced on some nights settle to the beat the numbers keep. To keep truth close, the team tries to break its own idea. They run the same checks when the telescope looks away from likely conduits. The whisper weakens. They step too far, and it diffuses into ordinary background. They return along a different conduit, and it wakes again. They measure at times when the solar wind is smooth. The signal softens, then less pluck from the shock, less music on the line. During a mild gust, it grows, not blaring, but firmer. Nature nods in the right places, a teacher pleased without clapping. Throughout, the language stays kind. A messenger could use this instrument the way one might send a ripple along a string stretched across a room. The ripple would not look separate from the string. It would look like the string. A code could hide inside a natural symphony and be heard only by ears that know both the music and the hall. If such a rider exists, the Boschok is a good saddle, constant, widespread, and generous with energy. If no rider exists, the symphony alone is enough to make wonder a daily habit. They reach for more detail. A small change in solar wind direction alters the Boschok's shape. Models refit themselves like clay. The predicted path length along one conduit shortens by a breath. The whisper's intervals adjust by a breath. These are breaths you can measure with a ruler and time with a second hand. The fit is not perfect. Nature rarely is. Perfect fits worry scientists. Good, living fits make them gentle and brave. Moonlets add their grace notes. A tiny body, not even round, passes through a region where a field line dips. The timing diagram catches a brief delay in the cadence that a model, with that moonlet included, predicts within a small error. If you were listening to a violin, you would call it a slide. In the graph, it is a slant in a thin line, a leaning that straightens again after the moonlit moves on. The team logs it as transient phase shift, coincident with moonlit crossing. It sounds dry. It feels like a window opening for a clean breath. The forbiddance pattern, stubborn as a catchy melody, refuses to fully belong to the model. The team adds more physics to the code. Temperature changes, density gradients, small drifts in the field. The fit improves, then fails to swallow the last little ridges. Those ridges are where the arithmetic lives, the primes and near primes that keep teasing. They may be nothing. They may be everything. Residual structure persists, the summary says. It is the kind of sentence that keeps people coming back tomorrow. As you drift, picture the conductor not as a person, but as a place, a hidden region near the Boschok where lines are tight and responsive, where a whisper can travel without breaking, where moonlets can tap and dust can glow in answer. Now picture a traveler, if you like, careful, patient, polite, riding those lines the way a kayaker rides a river's current rather than fighting it. Nothing in the plots requires a traveler. Everything in the plots makes the river worth loving. The voice remembers scale. The Boschok's width is millions of meters wide, but thin compared to the spaces it divides. The energies are small by star standards, large by ours. The timing we measure would feel slow to a radio station, quick to a glacier, just right to a heart at rest. That is why the room relaxes as the cadence steadies. People sit back from their screens and wrap their hands around warm cups. Awe loosens its shoulders. Fear takes a smaller chair. Ethics make a brief, gentle return. Even here, where the instrument seems to hum with nature's own tune, the rule stays. Listen, do not shout. If a rider is real, it is choosing a quiet instrument. Shouting back with a louder one would be rude to both rider and river. The plan stays the same. More passes, finer angles, new colors of light to test whether the cadence leans into some wavelengths more than others. The Boschok is not a stage you rush. It is a room where you enter softly so the music continues. In a calm montage, the camera of your mind glides along model field lines like paths drawn in faint silver. Small moons drift like beads. Dust lifts and settles. The shock bows and releases. From shock to ring plane, a tremble travels, and in that tremble, the whisper keeps time. People add the new runs to the old atlas. Tracks overlap, strengthen, and rest. One question sits lightly in the voice, phrase for sleep. If meaning hides in music, can we read its score? A score can be learned by ear, then written slowly, first the rhythm, then the notes, then the rests. The team has the rhythm on some nights. It hears rest placed where moonlets pass, It suspects notes in the distances between peaks. The score is not on paper yet. It is on the air, in the field, along the bow where wind and magnetism agree to play. The last graphs of the shift settle into calm lines. The cadence that once wavered in the ring shadows now holds like a lantern's flame behind glass. Models that once skated finally take a few clean steps. The forbiddance arithmetic remains, a faint engraving on the lantern's pane, refusing to be polished away. People write times and smile without showing teeth. The room's light dims to a warm hue. Outside, Saturn turns with the same patience that guided ancient hands who first marked its path in clay. The bowshock swells and shrinks with a breath no ear can hear. The river of solar wind keeps moving, endless and thin. Far inside, rings shine and fall back into night like frost shaken from a branch. And in the quiet space between, where strings are tight and music is willing, a small, steady cadence travels toward watchers who are learning how to listen. The glow softens. The instruments rest. On a desk, a pencil lies across a simple drawing. Circle, halo, curve, arrows, dots. It looks like a child's map, and perhaps that is what it is. First marks toward a place we barely know. The whisper does not end. It pauses in our hearing. Space holds it, the way a room holds a note that's just been sung. And as the room grows still and the numbers grow gentle, a thought remains quiet, patient, and a little bright, that the score is there to be read, if we can keep our hands steady and our listening kind. The silence deepened, yet hidden in that silence was something waiting to be understood. Night smooths over the screens like a steady hand over paper. The whisper near Saturn patient, polite waits in rows of numbers. Data scientists arrive with quiet tools. They sit beside the astronomers and engineers, and instead of lenses and pointing plots, they lay out models, loss functions, and little tests that ask, is there a grammar under this glow? The documentary voice speaks softly, simple as a lullaby with clear steps. Think of each pulse as a brush stroke across the sky. Some strokes are long, some short. Some land early, others late. If a hidden picture exists, the strokes will repeat in ways we can measure. If not, the strokes will wander like rain on a window. The team does not assume. It counts. They start where all compressed stories begin, with redundancy. If the signal carries meaning, it may not waste space. It might reuse patterns so a listener can fix mistakes. In computers, this is error correction, extra bits that help you restore a word if noise smudges it. The team searches for such kindness. They line up the pulses and look for small arrangements that return duplets, triplets, little ladders of timing that keep turning up, even when the ring plane changes or a shepherd moon drifts by. A faint scaffold appears. Not every night, not every angle, but often enough that a finger on a plot can trace it without losing the line. It is not rigid. It flexes like a reed, but it keeps root. The scientists raise no flags. They write down the counts. A model marks the recurring steps with light gray boxes, the way a painter marks guidelines before laying color. Compression tests arrive next. Imagine a language that uses fewer symbols when it can. If the whisper has structure, a smart compressor should shrink it more than it shrinks shuffled versions of the same data. The team tries simple schemes first, run length counts of repeated intervals. Huffman codes build from the most common pauses. Dictionary methods that store little phrasebooks of timing chunks. On real orderings, the file shrinks a hair more than on randomized ones. Not much. Enough to earn a new line in the notebook. Compressibility advantage small. Consistent near penumbra. They explain this in words a child could keep. When a song repeats a chorus, you can hum along sooner. When the song never repeats, you just listen. Our whisper seems to like choruses in some rooms. the rooms with shadow edges and field lines tightened by wind. Elsewhere it rambles, as if it wants to be noise and fails at being fully random. The difference is delicate. A single cup of tea set down too hard would sound louder than the statistics on these plots. And yet, the curves lean. To guard against wishful eyes, the team invites bias into the room and then shows it out. Models learn quickly. They also learn to see faces in clouds. So the scientists teach their tools to unlearn. They train on part of the data, test on nights the models have not met, and rotate the splits until every night is a stranger at least once. When a model finds a scaffold on a new night, when it names a repeating step near, 3-2 spacing, or calls out the soft aftershadow rise without being told trust grows by a thin layer, they keep the metaphors gentle. A model is like a polite guest. It should take only what is offered and leave the room as it found it. If it starts dragging furniture, imposing its favorite patterns on every floor, someone has to ask it to step back outside. Regularization does this. It's a rule that keeps models from stretching too far to hug the data. After regularization, some scaffolds shrink. Others stay. The ones that stay are the interesting ones. Across the room, a quiet collaboration blooms. Exoplanet researchers bring lessons from worlds that dim stars as they pass. They talk about light curves, how a clean transit has a sharp beginning, a flat middle, and a tidy end. They show how detectors sometimes write false dips that look real, and how you test those with injection and recovery. Plant a pretend transit in a noise and see if your pipeline can find it. The team borrows the trick. They inject pretend cadence into ring-edge night simple prime spacings, tidy binary markers, and watch whether their tools can catch them without being told. The tools catch the fakes easily. That's good. It means the net is strong enough. Then the team pulls the pretend notes back out and checks whether anything like them remains in the real whisper. It does not, which keeps pride small and honesty intact. Pulsar astronomers join with their clocks. They know how to measure timing that does not forgive sloppiness. They look for residuals, the small differences between a model's prediction and the data's truth, and ask whether those residuals talk to each other. If they do, something is still in the air. For our whisper, residuals near the ring plane sometimes align in gentle arcs, as if a mist hand were waving. The arcs soften when bow shot conduits are in view. They sharpen when dust spokes rise. Residual structure environment linked, someone writes. It reads like the margin note of a careful teacher. Now the scene turns to error correction again, because the idea is soothing. Kindness built into code. Could a message be wrapped in a simple code where every few pulses check the last few? Like friends watching friends cross a street? Read Solomon codes. Hamming codes names from textbooks live in cell phones and spacecraft. The team tests for their echoes. Parity bits placed at regular steps, checksums that flip with simple sums. Nothing clean appears. If a mind is speaking, it has either chosen softer rules or accepted that nature's strings blur too much for textbook neatness. The narration stays slow and kind. Models learn. Models can also be taught to forget. The scientists run ablation tests, remove a feature to see if the result falls apart. Remove ring shadow tags? The scaffold weakens. Remove bow shock alignment marks? The scaffold shifts instead of vanishing. Remove the intervals themselves and feed only brightness? The model flails and sits politely in a corner. Conclusion. Time between pulses carries the heart of the structure. Place and feel tune it. Brightness alone is not the language. A soft interlude of pictures. Translucent overlays pinned at the corners. Dotted lines marking predicted boosts from moonlit crossings. Pale rectangles where the algorithm says, look again. In one overlay, 3 nights line up with a grace that feels like a choir breathing. Rise as a shadow enters. a plateau, then a rounded fall. Beneath that shape, tiny ticks march in counts that prefer small numbers. 2s, 3s, sometimes 5s. Not always. Enough to tilt the scales. Because bedtime favors clarity, the voice explains false positives with a story. Imagine a field of tall grass. Wind makes waves that look like paths. A fox may also make a path. If you walk every wave, you will find many paths that go nowhere. To avoid this, you ask, does the path reappear tomorrow? Does it cross the stream the same way each time? Does it pass through the gate where the fence dips? If yes, your confidence grows. The team applies the same questions. The whisper's path reappears near penumbra. It crosses predicted field lines when the bow shock is lively. It favors the same lanes more than chance would. Still, the grass is high. They go slow. A small, bright moment. Someone plots the intervals on a grid and colors cells by how often certain steps follow one another. The grid tilts into a diagonal band, not crisp, but present. It means the next step often resembles the last. Short follows short, a little more than chance. Medium follows medium. Long follows long. This is how natural processes behave when they have memory. The way rivers bend where they bent before. It is also how codes behave when they avoid sharp corners to travel safely. A compromise emerges. The whisper remembers. Whether it remembers because of weather or because of will is still a soft question. The team tests a minimal grammar. It is not words. It is rules. Never two longs in a row without a short to rest. A medium often sits between a long and a short. A cluster of shorts near a shadow's edge. Feed these rules into a simple generator, and it produces a rhythm that looks like the data, especially on bow shock nights. Then the scientists remove one rule at a time. The fit worsens slowly, not in a crash. This is nature's signature again. Many causes, each a little important. If a sender exists, the sender writes on a busy page and accepts the blur. They keep kindness in their math. Cross-validation holds. When 1 month trains the model and another month tests it, the scaffold survives with smaller error bars. The model's uncertainty is drawn like thin arms around its predictions. Where the arms overlap measured points, the room relaxes. Where they do not, the room sharpens its pencils. A small set of misses sits stubbornly near intervals that felt forbidden earlier. The misses cluster like commas in a sentence that wants to be read. Exoplanet folks offer a final, gentle trick: to trend by folding. If a day-night pattern haunts your data, fold time by that period and subtract. The team folds by shepherd orbits and by the slow drum of the bow shock's changes. Subtract these drums, and the whisper's own tap becomes clearer for a few minutes at a time. In those minutes, a tiny ladder of prime-like steps shows itself, faint and then gone, like footprints on soft snow before sun arrives. No one overreaches. The narration remains calm. The omen remains ambiguous. Nature, clever and huge, can make artistry from ice and field. A traveler could also ride that artistry and leave brushstrokes a patient mind might follow. Both possibilities fit beneath the same quiet sky. As the shift slides toward its end, people label their plots with modest names. Run-length bias edge nights. Coherence after detrend. Dictionary reuse index. The words look plain. The faces reading them look peaceful. A small human moment settles among the charts. Someone tapes a tiny printout to a monitor. A lattice of dots that looks like a constellation no one has named. Under it, in pencil, as you drift into sleep, remember the mystery remains. It is not a claim. It is an invitation to rest without turning away. Before the lights dim, one more test runs. The team takes the intervals and maps them not to letters, but to shapes that a very old code might choose: triangles for shorts, squares for mediums, circles for longs. They stack the shapes along a line and look for repeating ornaments. Two keep returning: a triangle-squared circle near shadow exit, and a square-square triangle when bow shock lanes align. Are these words? They are patterns that help the models predict the next few beats by a hair better than chance. Sometimes a hair is everything in a room this quiet. The voice closes with the gentlest thread of science. We know how to make models learn. We are learning how to make them forget what is not there. We know nature can draw repeating lines if the canvas rings, moons, shock is set just so. We are learning where our own wishes try to pick up the pen. A faint structure has emerged, like constellations of meaning connected by hope. It is enough to keep listening. It is not enough to speak. Monitors soften to blues. Files settle into folders with neat dates. The ringed world wears its shadows like a soft scarf. Out beyond the bright lanes, the hidden conductor hums under the slow wind. In here, a lattice of dots waits on a wall for someone's morning eyes. Somewhere between dots and music, numbers and breath, the story holds. The glow thins to a thread, and the thread to a point, but it does not break. It rests, fragile and sure, and in the drifting quiet, one could almost sense that another secret was about to reveal itself. Night stretches, past Saturn's bright lanes into the deeper dark where other instruments wait. The whisper that learned to breathe along ring edges now meets a wider circle of ears. Arrays on Earth turn their dishes. Silent probes sweep the sky in other bands. Small telescopes in quiet deserts lift their lids. Far observatories compare clocks across time zones so that one long listen can cross the world without breaking. The documentary voice stays calm and clear. Collaboration is simple in shape, careful in practice. You make the same measurement in different places, at different times, and see what survives. If a pattern belongs to nature's wide house, it will appear more than once. If it belongs only to Saturn's porch, it will fade as the angle shifts. The teams decide to ask both questions at once. First Earth, a radio array in a dry valley, tunes itself to the band that likes charged dust. To the east, a single-dish telescope watches in a gentler band where broad hums live. In the south, another dish waits to take the relay as the planet sets for the north. The plan is like passing a lantern around a circle. No one holds it alone for long. Timestamps are matched to atomic clocks. Weather notes are logged. Between clouds and dawn, gaps appear, but the circle holds. The signal near Saturn does not turn loud in these ears, but it does not go silent. On nights when Webb sees a rise near penumbra, the ground arrays show a faint, slow lift, a family resemblance. When the bow shock conduits align, a distant radio ear hears a thin swell that drifts in step. The match is never perfect. That is honest. Earth's atmosphere adds its own small handwriting to every line. Yet across the noise, a gentle shape repeats. A rise, a soft plateau, a courteous fall. Toe-timed hints across facilities, a log reads. The words are plain. The feeling behind them is warm. Next, sky beyond Saturn. A survey telescope designed for faint afterglows. Things that linger after stellar bursts adds its eye to the work. It does not look at the rings. It stares at a patch near a quiet nebula where background light often hums with slow structure. If the forbidden pattern is universal, cousins might live here too. Data arrive thin and long, like winter light through blinds. The analysts filter starlight the way cooks strain tea slowly, without forcing. Broad trends are removed. Bright stars are masked. What remains is a veil of hum and hush. In that veil, a cadence sometimes steps forward, a set of intervals that favor small numbers, 2s and 3s, with an echo that feels like 5. It is not the same as Saturn's polite breath. It is a cousin that hums a familiar rhyme. On nights when solar wind at Saturn is quiet, and the ring whisper softens, the nebula field shows nothing special. On nights when the wind is lively and the bow shock at Saturn trembles, the nebula field lifts a hair as if the whole sky were answering a shared conductor. Possible kin. Low confidence, the margin says. The teams do not overreach. They mark the page and move on. A different group points a wide-field instrument at a galaxy cluster where radio halos are known to glow like slow fires. If a universal harbinger exists, it might hide in the halos, broad and patient. The halo sings, as expected, with deep noise spread over many notes. Within that noise, a narrow ridge appears for an hour, then sinks. Its spacing is not Saturn spacing. Its sidebands sit closer together. The analysts at night smile and then shake their heads. They have found a pattern, yes, but not a shared one. Nature is generous with music. Not every song is the same. The film keeps the language clear. Starlight is filtered with care. You subtract the big swings to see the small ones. You compare time zones so a signal that rises in one place can be checked in another before it falls. You ask whether a beat repeats, not in exact seconds, that would be too proud, but in steps that a patient mind can track. The answer across the circle is mixed. Enough echoes arrive to keep the room awake. Not enough arrive to nail a name to the door. Between tests, people coordinate the very human parts. Emails that cross midnight. Rubber bands around stacks of drives. Coffee cooling beside keyboards. A map on a wall holds pins. Chile, South Africa, Australia, Italy, the American Southwest. A small doodle in the sea marks a ship once used as a relay station in a past survey. Next to the map, a timeline curls like a ribbon. UTC, local times. Windows for Saturn low on the horizon and high, new moon and full. Collaboration sounds dry when printed. In rooms like these, it feels like warmth. The narration folds in a soft lesson. When many ears listen, you do not just look for matches. You look for shared mistakes. If two instruments in very different weather make the same wrong step, the step may be right. If one sees a spike and the others hear silence, the spike may be a local storm wearing the mask of meaning. When the ring whisper rises near a shepherd's shadow, and three arrays in three lands hear a mild lift, trust grows a little taller. When only one hears a lift and the others sleep flat, trust sits back down. To widen further, a small probe's archive is opened. Months ago, it watched a field near a quiet star cluster, scanning for glints from drifting debris. Its instruments were not tuned to our band, but they caught changes in brightness over long hours. An analyst overlays those changes with models of solar wind shifts across the solar system. In two places, peaks line up with times when the wind at Saturn was also restless. The match is soft and maybe chance. It is placed in a folder labeled Curios, a gentle word for maybe. Another team revisits supernova afterglows. When a star ends loudly, what it leaves can hum at the edge of hearing for weeks. If the forbidden pattern is a universal habit, a way that plasma, field, and dust like to sing, then that habit might appear in these slow fades. Data from past years are filtered anew with methods tuned by the ring study. One afterglow shows a faint ladder of repeating steps short, long, medium, that echoes our minimal grammar in shape, but not in tempo. A note is added beside the plot. Shared motif, different clock. Nature likes themes. Not all themes mean kinship. Some mean chance. The voice stays gentle with fear and hope alike. Hope wants to call every echo family. Fear wants to say only Saturn's porch matters. The work lives between them. Threads connect, but not tight enough to claim a sender, not loose enough to ignore. The teams write the same sentence in different styles. Suggestive. Needs more seasons. Seasons are honest units. They smooth the quick luck of a week into the careful weight of a year. Science for sleep means images that rest. Imagine telescopes sharing the sky like neighbors sharing a fence line. One holds a flashlight while the other looks. Then they trade. Imagine starlight straying through instruments like moonlight through blinds. Lines turning to bands. Bands to steady dim glow where tiny steps are easier to see. Imagine an inbox filling with plots at odd hours, each a small rectangle of night. Protocols guide these exchanges. Data are shared without loud claims. People use the same words to describe intervals and peaks, so plots can lay over plots without argument. Time zones are converted in both directions and checked by two sets of eyes. When a graph shows something bright, an email is copied to skeptics first. Skeptics are not enemies. They are the careful brakes that keep a cart from tipping. In one late run, 3 observatories catch a small ridge on the same night too, on Earth and Webb above. The times are off by minutes, as expected from angle and air. The shapes match in family, not in detail. A line on the whiteboard grows darker where all 3 plots overlap. A circle forms around the line. Next to it, multi-instrument coincidence moderate. Below that, smaller, not decisive. Honesty keeps the room soft. As days pass, a pattern of absence also helps. On nights when Earth's ionosphere is rough and local radio noise rises, the ground arrays lose the ridge, but Webb keeps it. On days when Webb looks away and the ground arrays look up, the arrays catch only the fat hum of background. This is not dramatic. It is useful. It says the ridge belongs to the sky near Saturn when the window is right, and to nowhere else when the window is wrong. Boundaries are as helpful as discoveries. A quiet question visits. If echoes appear elsewhere, are we hearing a universal instrument? The bowshock near any world can sing. Dust near any star can glow. Fields can carry rhythm across many doors. Perhaps the ring whisper is only the local solo of a wide orchestra we have not learned to hear. If so, the lesson is not smaller. It is larger. The universe may speak in a family of tunes that are not language, but are not noise either. To learn them is to add another sense to the ones we already love. The film keeps sleep near. A desert array under cold stars. A coastal observatory with gulls asleep on railings. A person in a dim lab wearing headphones, listening to a recording of a graph turned into sound. Faint, soft, almost like wind in pine. Across screens, error bars tighten around a small rise and then ease. Plots from different lands sit side by side like windows in a quiet house. Their lights match enough to make you breathe slower. People write in logs with care. They add nights that show nothing and nights that show a little. They treat nothing as a form of truth, not a failure. The list of nothings keeps the bright points honest. It tells you which angles to ignore and which to favor. It keeps hope from making every hill a mountain. This kind of writing looks dull. It is the handwriting of trust. A thought returns to the map on the wall. The pins form their own constellation. From above, they outline the edges of oceans and deserts, the curve of the earth, the patience of people who will trade sleep for another clean hour of sky. The ring planet is far, but the work of listening makes far feel shared. It is hard to be lonely when a chart stamped Karachi 310, Sutherland 010, Atacama 2010, and Canary 2210 lies open on a table like a slow star path. The whisper at Saturn remains the anchor. It is still shy, still local, still most itself when light leans low and field lines behave. But threads outward help the mind sit with it more calmly. If kin exist beyond the ringed frontier, they sing softly and not often. If they do not, the ring song is still enough to make patience a craft rather than a chore. The voice winds down without closing a door. Collaborations have widened. The circle of ears has grown. Connections glow like thin wires in a dark room. There, then them, then there again. No single wire is strong enough to carry a verdict. Together they outline a shape you can almost feel with your hand. A planetary instrument tuned by moons, answered by wind, may be visited by intention, maybe not. The answer does not hurry. It does not owe us speed. Monitors return to their cool blues. Files tuck into shared folders with tidy names. A person in one time zone writes, "Good night." A person in another answers, "Good morning." The ringed fortress turns with the same old grace. Somewhere, a junior researcher leans back, watches a small ridge hold across 3 plots, and thinks of a single room lit by a single screen. A long night, and a heartbeat that is not a heart. The glow fades to a thread, but in its fading, it carries a question that lingers in every watcher's mind quiet. Warm, and sure that the sky is not done with us yet. And the silence, widened by many years, still holds something waiting to be understood. Night gathers like a blanket pulled up to the chin. In the hush, monitors glow with small mountains and lakes, peaks, and valleys of a graph that has become a familiar landscape. A lone researcher sits with it, shoulders rounded, chair quiet. The whisper from Saturn, thin, patient, polite, breathes on the edge of the data stream. Hours stretch. Time turns gentle. The room narrows to light, paper, and the slow rhythm of keys. The documentary voice settles into calm, as if speaking from the other side of the glass. This is the long part. No applause, no headlines. Only cycles added to cycles, numbers stacking into strength. The researcher makes a list at the page's top. Date, start time, pointing offset, solar wind index, ring angle. The pen moves softly. The list is not a spell. It is a promise that the mind will remember what the night says. The spectrograph breathes its comb of lines. Each tooth rises and dips in the steady drift of background light. The anomaly lives between those teeth, the slightest ridge, the thin walkway that has refused to crumble under tests. The researcher watches it the way someone watches a sleeping child, not to wake it, only to be present when it turns. A quiet cursor marks each pulse. Intervals are counted like steps on an unlit path. 2 short, 1 medium. Pause. 3 short, 1 long. Pause. The pattern does not show off. It returns the way a tide returns, not to the same grain of sand, but to the same beach. On the desk waits an old notebook, corners softened by years. Between equations and sketches, there is a photo taped in small and sun-faded of a road in winter, pointing toward a pale horizon. The researcher keeps the picture near as a way to steady the eyes. In that road's simple line lives a vow, forward, even if slow. Calibration checks are done again, not because doubt is loud, but because care is a ritual that keeps fear small. Lamp lines crisp and true. Clock tick matched to atom. Dark frames even. The numbers behave. The instrument is steady. Whatever wavers does so outside across rings and dust, along field lines and shadow edges. Under a solar wind that loves to murmur rather than sing, the voice explains in 6th grade. Ease. More cycles collected means the error bars shrink. Like taking many photos of the same star and stacking them, faint details move from maybe to yes. Tonight adds a quiet handful of clarity. The forbidden spacing, the arithmetic that hints at speech and then dissolves, shows itself longer than before. Not long like an anthem. Long like a breath held and released, measured and true. A break for tea. Steam rises and fades under the lab's low air. The chair rolls an inch to the whiteboard. In a square of clean space, the researcher redraws the simple map. Saturn, a circle. Rings a halo, a curved bow for the shock. 2 thin conduits shown with pencil arcs. Beside it, the minima and maxima of the last hours, a tidy column of numbers that looks more like grocery list than cosmic riddle. Peak 0 hours 19 minutes and 32 seconds. Near penumbra. Dip 0 hours 41 minutes and 10 seconds. Shadow mid. The handwriting is even small, shy of the margin's edge. The graph's ridge holds. The side bands, a sign that one rhythm rides another, breathe with a steadier amplitude now that the angle is kind. The researcher overlays tonight's Fourier shape with last month's. The mountains align, maybe not like teeth, but like low hills remembered from a train window years apart. A softness of recognition spreads in the chest. This is the same country, walked by a longer path. Loneliness visits without harm. It is not the loneliness of absence. It is the kind that makes room for attention. In that room, small thoughts gain dignity. The way a shepherd moon leans on a ring edge like a hand on a railing. The way dust, charged and uncharged, swells and sinks like a tide that never learned to hurry. The way a thin line on a plot can feel like a distant heartbeat, even when the mind knows it is light, not blood. A small audio player sits beside the keyboard. For a minute, the researcher listens to the graph turned into sound frequency mapped to pitch, amplitude to volume. It is not music. It is movement. A dim flutter near the edge becomes a soft thrum when the conduit points just right. The room is quiet enough that the human breath seems to play along. The player is clicked off. The memory of the sound stays, guiding the eye back to the right slope of the curve. The narration returns to science. More cycles mean better tests. Phase coherence holds over longer windows when the line of sight passes through the path. The Bowshock likely feeds. Residual structure. The part models cannot swallow clusters around intervals that like 2s and 3s. The researcher tries a quick fold on 3-to-2 timing, subtracts the folded mean, and watches the remaining peaks step forward as if grateful for the cleared floor. They do not become a sentence. They become a phrase that could be a sentence when the nights have doubled. There are minor stumbles. For 20 minutes, the guide stars jitter and the pointing drifts by a hair. The correction lands cleanly, but the whisper thins to almost nothing, as if a shy speaker turned their head. The log receives a neat note, attenuation during microadjust. Recovered. The line feels like a clasped hand, there and then let go. Messages arrive silently in a corner window plots from a desert array, dampened by a passing patch of high air. A short note from a partner in the south, clouds thin, probably okay. A plot from a northern dish shows a small rise at a time that overlaps the peak and the main instrument by a couple of minutes. The alignment is not crisp. It is honest. The researcher marks a light check beside the time. Co-timed hint. The long night teaches slowness as a craft. Instead of rushing tests, the researcher sets up sequences that will reveal their worth only hours later. Staggered cadence. Color sweeps, small angle steps. The reward for patience is smaller uncertainty, a number dropping from 0.18 to 0.15, then 0.13. It is a quiet kind of joy. No one claps for error bars. They simply loosen the chest and make room for sleep later. A moment of doubt is welcomed like a guest who must be respected. What if the arithmetic is only weather made pretty by repetition? What if the forbidden spacing is a pattern in charged spokes that learning curves have not met before? To answer, the researcher replays older ring spoke nights and applies the same windows, the same kernels, the same noise models. Those nights carry rhythm, yes, and structure, yes, but not the faint regularity that tonight holds. The plots differ the way two cousins differ. Same eyes, different smile. Midway through the shift, the signal dips as the line of sight leaves the favored conduit. In that dip, the researcher looks again at the list of what would count as spoken, repetition that survives new angles, counts that land on simple numbers across months, structure that persists when the carrier's ring edge, shadow, field are modeled and removed. Tonight edges the second rule. Counts lean towards simple numbers more than they did 2 weeks ago, and do so across 2 instrument modes. Not a pass. A nudge. The tea cools. The room's hum seems to lower with it. The voice speaks softly about fear fading into patience. Fear wants a verdict. Patience wants another cycle. Awe turns to care, and care is what the night needs. The researcher checks storage paths, duplicates files, verifies hashes. Data are treated like something alive kept warm by attention, protected by routine, not because they are fragile, but because their meaning is. A small call from the past. Voyager's sketch of radio songs at Saturn taped to the back wall. A pencil arrow points where a young version of this same mind once wrote how. The arrow looks almost playful now. The answer to how has grown into stacks of code, shared calendars, coordinated nights, windows planned months in advance. The question, what, remains soft and undemanding, the way a poem's question remains even after you understand the rhyme. The graphs breathe. A cluster of intervals near the penumbra thickens into a curve that would let a simple model predict the next 2 or 3 beats with small error. It is not a lot. It is a kindness. The researcher tests the prediction on a fresh slice. 2 beats guessed, 1 beat off by a sliver, then back on. The log receives the note, short horizon predictability present. Another breath leaves the chest without being asked to. Around the monitors, darkness presses like water around a swimmer moving slowly and sure. The researcher thinks of those who kept watch before. Scribes pressing clay, an artisan grinding glass by hand, someone at a radio dish in a field, listening to a hiss that turned out to be the Milky Way. Their watches were also long. Their lines were also thin. History does not promise loud answers. It rewards chairs that do not roll away. At 3:02 UTC, the cadence brightens just enough to be obvious. The ridge in Fourier space climbs a small step. Sidebands breathe wider. The timeline plots from earlier nights look like pages of music where the same bar is circled in pencil. The researcher traces the curve with a finger on the screen, an old habit from days before touch displays were common. The finger leaves no mark. The mind does. The narration quiets to a whisper. For centuries, travelers stared at the night sky and whispered questions we still cannot answer. The sentence feels as if it has been waiting in the room. The researcher writes it in tiny print in the notebook margin. It is not evidence. It is a reminder that love of questions is not weakness. It is the source of care. If this is a messenger, it is gentle borrowing nature's strings, respecting the long patience of dust and field. If it is nature, it is beautiful, teaching us a new way the sky can organize breadth and brightness. The difference matters. The difference can wait. The act does not change. Collect, verify, breathe. The long night is not a test of strength. It is a lesson in posture. Dawn begins to touch the far edge of Earth. The researcher toggles the interface to night. Mode out of habit, even though the room will stay dim. A final run begins. One last sweep along the favored conduit, one last off-plane tilt, one last dark frame. The pencil notes slow. Peak at 3 hours, 19 minutes, and 7 seconds. Phase hold 7 minutes. Off-axis thinning expected. The last entry before the shift ends is quiet. Cycles added 41. The file saved. Backups complete. Plots are placed in a folder named with a date and a promise to revisit. The chair eases back. The photo of the road is touched with 2 fingers, lightly, as if to check that it is still there. It is. The room remains for a minute after the person stands, monitors breathing, graphs resting, a cup cooling by an open notebook, a thin ridge on a plot that has learned how to hold. Night lets go without complaint, like a tide that knows it will return. The researcher steps out and closes the door a fraction too gently, as if sound itself might bruise the hour. Inside the machines, light waits his numbers. Outside, the ringed fortress turns with its old, unhurried grace. Shepherds sweep. Field lines bend and release. Somewhere in the bow's curved hush, a trembling begins again, runs along a string, and reaches the plane where dust can glow and instruments can translate. The question that wrote it, if there was a question, has not yet learned our names. That is all right. Some friendships start with long silences. The voice leaves you where the researcher left the room. At the door, hand on the frame, listening to a quiet that carries rhythm. The glow on the screen has faded to a thread. The thread has thinned to a point. But in that point, the promise of return is written like a soft watermark. The night is wide. The numbers are faithful. The room, empty now, feels full of a tension that has not yet cooled. The silence deepened, yet hidden in that silence was something waiting to be understood. Night settles like a soft blanket over the ringed world. The telescope keeps its gentle watch. In the dark, numbers drift like snow. Each one, a small light carried from a place where air does not exist and voices do not carry. The whisper that has followed us patient, polite rests inside those numbers. It is not louder now. It is clearer. And clarity, here, is its own kind of brightness. The documentary voice returns to the simplest picture. Saturn turns with unhurried grace. Rings sweep like a pale halo, bright where sunlight leans low, dim where drifting shadow slides across ice. Shepherd moons keep their careful lanes. Beyond the rings, the bowshock folds the solar wind and sends trembles down magnetic strings. Our instruments listen for those strings to sing. The song is not speech. It is a timing, a soft arithmetic, a breath that repeats enough to be found and then rests. What we know stands steady. We have a structured anomaly near the rings, strongest at edges and penumbras, clearer when a rare geometry opens a window through a gap. It leans narrowband, but not needle-thin. It carries sidebands, as if one rhythm rides another. It answers to field lines the way a harp answers to a hand. Bowshock conduits act like paths. Moonlets add small accents. Charged dust rises and falls like a tide that forgets to hurry. Models fit much of this music Alphen speeds, resonance tucks, spoke-borne lifts, and still leave a small residue, a forbidden spacing that resists being tucked away. That residue is honest. It is the part we keep in the light. Speculation stands softer than fact. A messenger might ride nature's instrument the way a kayaker rides a river, not pushing the water, letting the water carry. A message could hide inside a natural symphony and be heard only when you know both the tune and the hall. Or perhaps there is no rider at all, only a planet's quiet orchestra playing a piece we have not learned to read. Both thoughts fit in the same room. Neither one needs to leave. Science speaks in a sixth-grade voice when it is most sure. Light travels. Telescopes count. Spectrographs turn brightness into lines. Fourier analysis turns time into little maps where hidden beats draw ridges. Error bars wrap every point with honest arms. Add many nights, and faint things hold. Trim suspects with Care Aurora as driver, disfavored. Pulsar lock not supported. Tumbling shard, inconsistent. Instrument echo, no. What remains is a shape built from orbit, field, and dust, with a small arithmetic that keeps returning like a shy guest at the door. In this final quiet, the team gathers strands. They lay them out on a table the way a parent lays out pieces for a puzzle at day's end. Ring dynamics. Resonance gaps, spoke behavior under low sun. Bowshock alignment, moonlit timing, ground array hints. Stable anchors from the window, compressibility that favors edge nights. Short horizon predictability near penumbra. Each piece is named, None is forced. Edges meet in places. Some gaps remain, and the gaps are not failures. They are spaces where tomorrow will fit. Calibration has become ritual, almost a bedtime prayer. Lamps true, clocks steady, dark frames even. Cross-instrument checks agree within shy margins. Off-axis tests thin the cadence, and on-axis tests to strengthen it. Randomization shakes order into noise. Real order returns when time is set right. Models that overlearn are asked to forget. Models that forget too much are reminded with gentle rules. The result is not a banner. It is a lattice, light as spider silk and just as strong for its size. The camera of your mind drifts outward and rests. Saturn is a pearl again. The rings are a brushstroke. The stars are old companions. The voice offers a small lesson that feels like sleep. In a wide universe, meaning does not always arrive as words. Sometimes it is a rhythm on a string, a pattern in brightness, a step you can predict for a little way before it bends. We have met such a step here. We have not named the dancer. That is all right. In notes meant to be kept, a line appears. We have learned a new kind of listening. It is not poetic in the log. It is practical. Listening now means geometry as much as time waiting for the ring plane to turn, for shadows to thin, for field lines to align. It means patience built into schedules, ethics woven into method. The choice not to broadcast stands like a lighthouse that shines by staying still. We do not call into the dark. We keep the window open. We let the tide carry what it will. The film returns, softly, to people. Night shift chairs that no longer squeak because someone finally oiled the wheels. A mug ring on a printout shaped like a small crater. A smiley face next to polite on a whiteboard. A photo of a winter road taped inside a notebook. These are not answers. They are the human shape of attention. The proof that wonder can be a habit and not just a spark. You are invited to imagine the signal as a traveler riding a cosmic wind, gliding along streams you cannot see. You are also invited to imagine it as the wind itself, no rider. Only motion drawing the same line again and again until patient eyes learn to follow. One picture makes the heart lift. The other makes the craft deepen. Neither picture asks you to choose before you rest. The science holds you like a steady hand. Orbit is the shape of time in space. A comet learns it. A grain of ice learns it. A moonlet knows it without thinking. Magnetic fields give time a voice vibrations, carried along loops like whispered songs in a wire. Charged dust turns time visible, lifting into spokes and falling back in sheets as sunlight leans and leaves. Spectrographs, cool and faithful, turn this dance into lines. When lines do something odd and keep doing it, we learn to say, there is structure. There is a reason. Let's be gentle as we ask. In one last pass, the telescope peers along a favored path. The ridge in Fourier space rises by a small step and holds. Sidebands breathe in even measure. Phase coherence stretches, then thins, then stretches again. A short horizon predictor, tuned by weeks of nights, guesses 2 beats and comes close on a third. None of this is a headline. All of it is a promise. The pattern is not a trick of 1 hour or 1 room. It lives where the sky invites it to live. Logs close with plain words, structured, faint, persistent, local to Saturn environment, bow-shock coupling likely, residual arithmetic present. Each phrase is a bead. Together, they make a simple strand you can hold without breaking it. In the margin of the last page, someone writes, smaller than the rest, if meaning is there, we will meet it again, calmly, patiently. It is not policy. It is posture. The voice eases toward a final breath. The cradle of silence is not empty. It is full of careful listening. Inside it, awe is not a shout. It is a steady gaze. Hope is not a leap. It is a chair pulled close to a window. Fear has a seat, but it does not speak first. Method speaks first. Method says, repeat, verify, breathe. Wonder answers, I will wait with you. As Earth turns, the control room dims. Screens settle into blues and grays. Files duplicate the safe places with names that include dates, angles, and small jokes only night crews understand. The telescope keeps station in deep shade, mirrors quiet, detectors attentive. Somewhere beyond the rings, field lines bow and release. Somewhere moonlit brushes a lane. Somewhere the wind changes its mind by a breath. A tremble begins, runs along a string, and arrives at a place where dust can glow and instruments can measure. The camera rises above the planet until the rings are a thin thread on black cloth. Stars hold their places like old teachers. The whisper becomes what it has always been to us, a small difference that returns when we are ready. Not a demand, not a test, an invitation to stay. We close without closing the door. The anomaly near Saturn is likely shaped by magnetospheric music and moonlit geometry, yet it carries an unexplained secret that refuses to be hurried. We do not crush that secret with claims. We hold it in the light where fresh nights can find it. If a messenger is hiding in nature's instrument, it will keep choosing patience too. If the universe is only teaching us a new kind of listening, the lesson is already a gift. The glow on the plot thins to a thread, and the thread to a point. The room grows quiet enough to hear a page turn and a pen cap click home. Out beyond the glass, the ancient traveler keeps its pace, rings bright as breath, shadows soft as memory. You drift with it for a while, eyes half closed, mind clear as water. In that drifting, the unknown traveler messenger or music feels near enough to touch and wise enough to wait. The silence does not end. It deepens kind and wide. Inside it, science keeps its calm and wonder keeps its warmth. And somewhere in the tender distance, where starlight threads through ice and field, a gentle rhythm continues to breathe neither omen nor prophecy, only an invitation quiet, patient, and sure, as if the night itself were saying, I am here, and there is more to hear.